Hey guys, welcome back. This is a story about what if Naruto befriended Kurama early. After a life-changing event, Naruto meets Kurama early and they become partners and even good friends. With a better outlook on life, he meets many who want to join him and help achieve their dreams and goals together. Among those friends are many beautiful women. Realize just how important he is to them. Before we start, thank you for all of the support. It really means a lot to me. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and leave a like. You can suggest a Naruto fanfiction with a link in the comments if you want me to read it, and check the description for the creator of this great fanfic and support them for making this fanfic. So let's start. Warning. This story has mature language, sexual themes, and graphic depictions of violence and gore. Disclaimer. I do not own Naruto or any of its characters. Chapter 19. A long day. One lovely fall day in the Hokage's office. I can see your fingers twitching, Hokage-sama. Yugao's voice cut into Sarutobi Hiruzen's consciousness just as he was seriously contemplating setting fire to the stacks of paperwork sitting on his desk. His hands were inches from forming the first seal for one of his Kaden jutsu. He glared up at where Yugao was concealing herself in the ceiling. You're a killjoy. My apologies, but I'm doing you a favor. Better to get these out of the way now instead of having new duplicates added to your regular workload the next day. I wonder how Minato-kun managed to get out of the office so early most days and be able to move on to other things. I wish he'd have at least left a hint somewhere for me to find out that secret. The third grumbled as he stared forlornly out the window at the village underneath. It was clear most of the populace were outside on the streets as they happily enjoyed the beautiful and sunny day. There was something to be said about living in the land of fire, since its mostly temperate climate made living through all 4 seasons easy. Even in winter, it rarely dipped below 10 degrees Celsius. Speaking of blondes, isn't someone a little overdue for a visit here? Lion's voice by the bookcase curiously inquired. I believe Naruto-kun is still getting used to being back in the classroom for the final term. It's only been a month or so. It's hard to believe he's still not an official shinobi yet after hearing what happened in Iron this past summer. Boar's voice spoke up from his concealed spot on the office's couch. I offered him a chance to graduate early, but he preferred to spend the remaining time with his friends. The third replied with a proud smile. Think he'd do well with us? Boar wondered, and Hiruzen chuckled when Neko and Lion quickly voiced their agreement. Trying to recruit your sworn enemy, he said amusedly. Hokage-sama, from what we've heard, that kid destroyed 10 experienced shinobi with nothing but his wits and guts. That's quality Anbu material. I'd gladly roll out the red carpet for him on his way into the headquarters. Lion said straightforwardly. Sarutobi nodded with a grin, enjoying seeing how his surrogate grandson affected other people. You may want to hold on to that red carpet. A new voice, full of mirth, cut into the conversation, making everyone's attention snap to the office's door. Standing in the doorway was the person they were just talking about, Uzumaki Naruto. He was grinning with his visible eye flashing mischievously. Yo. He greeted with a raised hand. It's good to see you back here, Naruto-kun. The Hokage said happily as he worked to contain his amusement at his Anbu being caught unaware by Naruto again. I'm finally used to being back in the academy. My classmates just wouldn't leave me alone about my eye and Hinata-chan. As for me being recruited into the Anbu, I'm not saying that's off the table, but I wouldn't hold my breath for the foreseeable future if I were you guys. Naruto replied honestly as he stepped into the office. Oh. Well, at least we won't have to deal with your stupid pranks. Boar's voice huffed in mock offense at being declined. Naruto smirked evilly as he gazed at the couch. I'm planning on stopping doing pranks for the most part when I graduate, but if you're going to miss them, I'd be happy to keep on going. No. Please don't, all 3 hidden Anbu cried at the same time in pure terror. Naruto smiled brightly as he threw up a victory sign while the Hokage laughed out loud. What brings you here, Naruto-kun? He finally inquired after settling down. The blonde cleared his throat. I learned something new from Hinata-chan recently and I was wondering why you didn't tell me earlier. What is it that I failed to inform you about? Hiruzen's expression turned somewhat serious. Naruto glanced around at where the hidden Anbu were. Clan bylaws. He said quietly, and the Hokage understood. He waved a hand dismissively. Please give us some privacy. He quickly ordered of his Anbu, who immediately vanished from the room. There was dead silence for a long moment as the two stared at each other, before the older man broke it with a deep sigh. I apologize for not telling you anything about this sooner, but you have to understand that you learned of your heritage when you were just 9. I thought it was better to put this off until I felt you were mature enough, he explained. Naruto grinned and shrugged. I'm not mad, Hokage Gigi. At that age, I'd have been more concerned about avoiding getting the cooties. I can imagine that. However, if not now, then I would have broken the news to you soon. Most likely when you've made Chunin. Why that particular milestone? That's when I believe would be a good opportunity for you to take up more responsibilities as the last representative of the Uzumaki clan. Also, your parents left many things in my care and I'm to turn all of them over to you when you reach age 16 or get promoted to Chunin, whichever comes first. Naruto widened his eyes at that revelation. I don't suppose I could do something to get my inheritance early, he asked almost hopefully. Unfortunately, the third shook his head sadly. Your parents' will was very adamant about that particular condition. That's too bad, but if that's what they wanted, then I'll have to obey them as their son. Worth a try, though. Have you given any thought to the particular bylaw that brought you here? The old man inquired. You mean knocking up willing women everywhere to restore the Uzumaki and Namikaze lineages? Naruto retorted bluntly and grinned when the Hokage Winston shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That's a crude way of putting it, but yes. To be honest, I didn't like the idea at first when Hinata-chan explained this to me. I would have been perfectly happy to be a one-girl man with only her, if we ever go that far. The whole village would be shocked if you two don't tie the knots within the next few years. The third thought in deadpan. Is that still your thought now? He queried, correctly guessing there was more to this. Naruto sighed and ran a hand through his hair before smiling fondly as if he was remembering something. Ever since the blonde began wearing his eye patch, the Hokage noticed this young man had become more expressive with his emotions. Perhaps it was due to being able to focus on just his one visible eye for any hint of emotion. After that, Hinata-chan then launched into how she was looking forward to getting to know more women who genuinely love me. She hoped to have more sisters that she would have a lot in common with, at least in regard to me, but also different in other ways as well. She had this excited look on her face, and I knew I just couldn't really say no to her. She was just so encouraging, and I honestly couldn't find any good enough reason to go against any part of this. Probably didn't help that I actually like a couple other women in addition to her, and I couldn't just turn off my feelings for them. He explained. The village will be grateful to you when your children grow up to be powerful and help keep Konoha even more safe and secure if they so desire to follow in your steps. The Hokage replied with a smile, but Naruto smirked weakly. I'll be honest with you. It won't be out of duty to the village or even to my two clans if I do this, Hokage Gigi. It'll still be because I genuinely feel affection for the women I might meet and it's mutual on their part as well. I may be beginning to think about this, but there's already at least one thing I know I want out of all this. There has to be strong companionship and unity between the wives if I actually have more than one, and the children must have love and attention. In short, I want this to be one big family. I've never had that myself growing up, and I don't want the same for them. He declared with the most determined expression the old man had ever seen on him so far. The third nodded sadly, inwardly cursing this young man's unfortunate circumstances not for the first time, and definitely not for the last time either. I wouldn't settle for anything less from you. Nevertheless, whatever will happen in the future, I'm glad to see you'd be open to this, Naruto-kun. Oh, it still hasn't sunk in yet. If any other girl ends up showing affection toward me, I'd probably wonder what the hell I was getting myself into. Naruto replied with a nervous chuckle. A few minutes later outside the office. Looks like you're actually going through with this. Kurama suddenly spoke as Naruto was making his way down the stairs toward the Hokage Tower's exit. I'm still thinking about it. I wonder if I should blame my teenage hormones for this. I have to admit the prospect of getting to love more beautiful women in addition to Hinata-chan is pretty enticing. I'd say you have a pretty remarkable control of your libido for a healthy young man, so no, you can't blame your decision on hormones this time. Hell, Kushina was hornier than you at this point, and it's still a big puzzle to this day that she hadn't even entertained the prospect of allowing more women to get with Minato, considering he was the last Namikaze at that time and a Hokage. She could have gotten so much kinkier that way. Even if we didn't include Minato's special circumstances, polygamy isn't illegal here. It's just not usually made public. And at what point in this conversation did you think it was a great idea to remind me about my own mother's sexuality and fetishes, Kurama? Naruto grumbled in annoyance as he tried not to think about his deceased parents in that way. You don't understand, Naruto. I learned things from her. It's not every day a millennia-old entity like me with my vast knowledge learns something new at this point. She was like the goddess of sex incarnate. You should have seen the many amazing things she did just with her tongue. Arg. The embarrassed blonde flailed his arms around his head in a futile attempt to shut Kurama up. This drew strange looks from people around him since he was out on the streets at this point. Are you done? A red-faced Naruto grumbled inwardly as he slouched over childishly and shoved his fists into his pockets before continuing down a street toward the Central Market District. Yes. Kurama chirped cheerfully, but it was painfully obvious she was going to bring this topic up repeatedly in the future just to annoy him for her own amusement. Troubles with your tenant, a female voice whispered from behind. Naruto smirked and glanced over his shoulder to find the innocently smiling face of Yugao. She had just changed into a regular Junin outfit without the flak vest. Was it that obvious, Yugao-chan? I guess you were about to get off duty when I came to see Hokage Gigi. He assumed. He hadn't noticed until recently that he began to use the affectionate suffix with Yugao. When he tried to apologize about his rudeness one day, she laughed it off and explained, with a happy grin and a small blush, that it felt more natural to her this way. They did spend a lot of time together lately on sparring, chatting, and going out with Anko. The off-duty Anbu nodded and fell into step beside him while they made their way down the busy street, unaware they were attracting attention. Yugao was a no-brainer with her incredible beauty and a confident aura that only a powerful kunoichi possessed. It was the other one that was causing some mixed emotions in the villagers around him. The older people, unable to let go of their past, felt incredibly threatened by Naruto with his increasingly masculine features as he had grown a few more inches and gained more muscle mass since his hospitalization all those months ago. Not to mention the visible scar down the left side of his face and the eye patch. The younger people were different, however, in that they felt mostly admiration. The young males admired his cool but approachable aura despite the orange outfit, and they wanted to be like him one day. The young females couldn't help but forget their elders' warnings to avoid and ignore him, and burn every detail of him into their memories instead. They knew he would be in their naughtiest dreams for a while to come. To them, he was the quintessential, bad boy, of their fantasies. Though they were also jealous, too. The males of Naruto for being next to such a perfect woman without sputtering or blushing as they would have, and the females of Yugao for casually speaking to such a dreamy-looking man, and having the looks to back it all up. None of this were noticed by the duo as Yugao stretched out her arms overhead with a blissful moan, stretching her already tight blue long-sleeved shirt against her skin. Naruto had to admit she struck a very attractive profile as his eyes discreetly took in her amazing body when the thin fabric stretched to show off the curves and contours of her incredibly toned stomach, hourglass figure, and shapely breasts. He also easily made out the outline of a tank top under the shirt. Not for the first time, he felt a small amount of envy, but great respect as well, for Gekko Hayate on gaining this beautiful and strong woman's affections. He'd have to meet this man and hope they'd get to spar occasionally, from the way she spoke about his skills. He wasn't the only one checking her out involuntarily, he told himself, as many men on the street at that moment felt their eyes drawn to the gorgeous purple-haired woman as if heeding the calls of a siren. Maybe I should take back what I said about you having control of your libido. That is one fine body, though, so I can understand why. Kurama cut in with clear amusement. Hush, you. Go take your nap. He grumbled with a small blush. The dark-skinned beauty smirked and shrugged as she yawned. She then drifted off to sleep for a long nap inside the mindscape with her almost daily activity of poking fun at Naruto now done. She curled up cutely on a soft and cool patch of grass under a large tree's shade, her kimono temporarily serving as blanket for the most part. If she wanted, she would have had Naruto create a house with a bed for her, or at least used one of the buildings in the urban portion of the mindscape, but she always preferred being as close to nature as possible. Likely due to many years spent in her fox form. Oh, that feels so good. I've been cramped up in that ceiling for too long. Yugao exhaled happily as she lazily shook her arms after stretching. She then turned her head toward her fellow swordsman, who immediately shifted his gaze forward now that the brief display of sexiness was over. Naruto-kun, do you have some free time? I got plenty today. It's almost lunchtime. How about I treat you? I'd like to spar with you afterward as well. You still can't get enough of me. Naruto teased with a smirk. Yugao glanced away with a slight blush. Like I've said before, sparring with you has done nothing but improve my skills in leaps and bounds. Hayate-kun will be very surprised when he returns from his mission and sees how far I've come. Hard to believe you barely won our first spar and afterward you're having an easier time kicking my butt. The blonde admitted. Yugao scoffed. Doesn't mean you're any less terrifying to fight. I still get chills when I remember your rapid stabs that seem to come from everywhere. I still have to rely on pure instincts to deflect those. You're plenty scary yourself, Yugao-chan. I know my style doesn't have perfect defense, but you kept your cool while easily analyzing and attacking my openings even though I was aggressive and relentless. I'm just surprised you didn't use that strategy much in our first spar. I think it was just nerves facing off against a new sparring partner because of just how few of us true sword users there are here in Konoha. Also, your style has never been seen before anywhere in the nations. It was just a matter of getting used to how you fight. Yugao replied thoughtfully. Most people would have included many members of the Anbu, who needed to have some degree of experience with a bladed weapon as a basic requirement for joining the unit, in that classification of sword users, but not her. Instead, she easily counted on one hand how many people she knew here in Konoha that truly practiced the use of swords, with Naruto and herself included. It would have been too easy otherwise. Naruto agreed as they began to look for a place to eat. Soon in a packed barbecue restaurant. So, is it okay for me to ask about what you discussed with Hokage-sama? Yugao inquired curiously as she deftly used her chopsticks to pick up a cooked piece of meat from the hot iron plate sitting on the table between her and Naruto. They were sitting cross-legged across from each other on the tatami floor in one of the restaurant's many small private rooms in the rear. The room also had a large window on the rear wall that opened up to an excellent view of the Hokage monument and the surrounding area. The rooms, each protected from prying ears with privacy seals, were a favorite feature of the shinobi visiting this restaurant since they had more privacy to discuss sensitive information compared to the restaurant's main dining area. The clan bylaws. Naruto quizzed and Yugao nodded as she nibbled on her meat. The blonde did his usual sheepish pose and chuckled nervously. This isn't an easy topic for me to discuss with any woman. Let me begin by asking you if Anko-chan has ever mentioned to you who my parents were. No. She was rather annoying about it too, like how she would randomly say, I know something you don't. In a sing-song voice for the past year. Yugao grumbled with an annoyed frown, and Naruto grinned fondly as he collected several pieces of his meat off the hot plate. I'll give you a hint. He said, lazily pointing his chopsticks toward the large window as if to indicate something outside. Yugao followed the gesture to see nothing but the large monument dominating the view through the window. She narrowed her eyes at this vague gesture, but something was niggling at her consciousness as her gaze landed on the fort's large bust. Her eyes bulged out comically in realization. She then rapidly shifted her gaze back and forth between Minato and Naruto, who was doing a perfect imitation of his father's scowling expression on the bust, several times and her mind latched onto how similar they looked. She groaned loudly and covered her face with both hands, obviously feeling like an idiot. Oi, you'll burn your meat. Naruto warned in monotone, having obviously anticipated this reaction, before nonchalantly reaching across the table to transfer her cooked pieces of meat to her plate with his chopsticks. It took her a long moment to speak. I guard the Hokage's office on a regular basis. I see the fourth's picture hanging on the wall behind the desk all the time. How the hell was I so stupid to not have made the connection, considering how often you visited the office over the years, she mumbled disbelievingly through her hands. It probably helps that none of the people that knew about this made a big deal out of it. Thanks to that, they never drew any attention to this fact, even if it was obvious. Besides, I prefer to be known as just Naruto, not the honorable son, and all that crap. He assured. Yugao slowly removed her hands and nodded reluctantly, before an idea popped into her head. I just realized who your mother was too. It was obvious how much they cared for each other, even though I was still in the academy at that time. I assume the bylaw you're referring to involves restoring the Uzumaki line with multiple women. I suppose your namikaze traits shouldn't die out either. She deducted calmly. See. You're still as sharp as ever, so don't let that missed connection earlier get you down. He praised and Yugao blushed a little. So you can see why it's not an easy topic for me to bring up with anyone. What if they assume I'm just using this to get as many women as I can? He explained. The Anbu cocked an eyebrow with a smirk as she nibbled on another piece of meat. Are you? No. Even though I do appreciate the fine female form like any other straight man, I would be happy enough with just Hinata-chan if we go that far. The whole village would be very surprised if they don't see her in a white wedding kimono next to you soon. Yugao echoed the Hokage's thought from earlier in deadpan as well. You don't seem to be bothered by this. Aren't women generally disapproving of anything that Ero Sennin would wholeheartedly support with all his effort? Naruto's voice snapped her out of her thoughts and she took a moment to get what he was saying before chuckling. You'd be surprised how accepting most women, especially kunoichi, are. In this kind of world, life's too short and only the most traditional women would fight to the bitter end to make sure there's only one man for each woman. I personally know 2 women in the Anbu who are sharing a man, and one of my male colleagues admitted he was seeing 2 sisters. And by traditional, you mean someone like Kurenai-san, I guess. Naruto ventured with a raised eyebrow. Yugao had to sigh at her friend's well-known hatred of anything perverted. Honestly, she seriously needed to get laid, and her longtime academy crush Sarutobi Asuma couldn't come home from his tour with the 12 Guardians soon enough. Rumors and the third's slightly chipper mood as of late seemed to confirm that his son would return any day now. Polygamy isn't as rare as you think it is. It's generally accepted among the women, both civilian and kunoichi, in this village, and likely other major hidden villages too. In this kind of world, most weak and stupid men seem to find many ways to get killed early in their lives, leaving only stronger and smarter ones that many women would want to have children with. While there are still many of us that would never share their men with others, the female-to-male ratio is rather skewed and it's not uncommon for 2 or 3 women, usually sisters or good friends in many cases, to share one man and bear his offspring. They just don't usually make it public. Your situation is only different in that it'll be publicly known due to your heritage, and you all can legally marry. She explained. Naruto nodded in understanding. So I guess I can expect no more than 3 then, he wondered. Yugao actually snorted out a laugh, drawing a confused frown from the blonde. Oh no, 3 is definitely too small a number for someone like you. She said in between chuckles. What do you mean? Despite the village praising that little Uchiha boy is their next rising star. I, Hokage-sama, and the others who really matter in the force know it's you instead, and the iron incident reinforced our beliefs. Not even your father did all of what you've done by your age. He saved my mom from Kumo all by himself. Naruto tried to say dismissively, but Yugao wouldn't leave it at that. You saved the 2 Hyuga heiresses. And we can't forget Anko-chan. He graduated at the age of 10. Hokage-sama offered you a chance to graduate at 9 but you declined. He killed hundreds before he was even 14, the same age as I. Just bandits and genin mostly. You took on 12 C ranks, 1 B rank, and 1 A rank before you even graduated. The fact you survived them all is a huge testament to your skills. Also we can't forget that Kumo kidnapper who you managed to sneak up on even though you haven't had any training yet. He was a Junin. He knew powerful jutsu. Are you even trying? You've learned more high-level jutsu at this age than almost anyone else. Still, I cheated with Kurama's help, my Kage Bushin training method, and the Sharingan. Hello. Hiraishin. The ultimate instant kill jutsu. The main reason he was a SS rank shinobi at 18 instead of a high A rank. Damn it. I give up. I admit I'm pretty strong. You happy? Naruto grumbled as he pouted and crossed his arms childishly while Yugao was smirking victoriously. The blonde let out a defeated sigh and decided to get back on track. So the stronger the man, the more women he may attract. This all sounds like, he struggled to say something tactful. A perfect example of the alpha dog hierarchy among the more primitive people in the past, right? Or, Alpha Fox, in your case, I suppose. She finished and Naruto nodded slowly with a wince. Yugao smiled assuredly to show no offense for that kind of thought before continuing. Yeah, I can't deny that even on behalf of my fellow females. I suppose in a society where war is eliminated, we'd be able to afford to pick even a weak man if he had just enough attributes we look for, and not have to worry much about being protected. However, in this world where death and rape are common, and war could happen any minute, being with the strongest male usually meant getting the best possible protection, even for most of the powerful kunoichi out there. Naruto's eyes widened before looking down a little forlornly at hearing about the state of this world. Kurama had told him stories about past civilizations in which there were no war for long periods of time, and it happened exactly like Yugao said. Polygamy was actually outlawed everywhere and men didn't have to be strong and smart to attract women. Kurama disagreed with this, as she was a firm believer in the philosophy of the survival of the fittest. She felt her belief was proven correct as she watched previous civilizations become weaker and dumber due to the gene pool becoming diluted with defective genes. Meanwhile, stronger and confident people were slowly pushed out because of their barbaric nature, leading to insecure and sniveling idiots blackmailing and buying their way into powerful positions in their civilizations and trying to show off who had the biggest dick. That lasted until one idiot finally pushed the big red button and reset everything back to medieval age where those same barbaric people were rulers once again. Naruto shook himself out of his thoughts as Yugao continued. Though, if strength is all there it is to you, then 3 is all you would have gotten at most. Instead, any smart woman will be able to tell you have a very caring and loving nature in addition to your growing power. In the near future, they'll see that you would do everything possible to keep your friends and loved ones safe. That'll score major points with those looking for someone that can protect them and their children. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows in thoughtful silence for a moment, before he realized something. What about the Hokages? They were the strongest men in the village yet I don't remember anything about them being surrounded by women. He disputed. Yugao sweet-dropped as she remembered some details she learned as an Anbu. Let's begin with the first and fourth Hokages. The main similarity between those two is that they each married an Uzumaki. Need I say more? She offered as if Naruto would easily get it. It took him a moment to realize the important point before sweet-dropping as well. Yeah, that makes sense. From what Kurama told me, Mito Bachan and Mom had nasty tempers and were so headstrong they basically controlled their husbands. Can't believe my dad was so whipped. He conceded. The Anbu chuckled before continuing. The third actually had 2 women, who were very close friends, at one point in his life. Unfortunately, the first one was killed early in the First Great War, and the other, she paused and sighed here, remembering watching her leader stare forlornly at a small photo he kept in his desk from time to time. Sarutobi Bawako died on that night. She was helping your mother give birth to you. She finished. Naruto widened his eyes feeling a sharp pang of guilt. Kurama had told him there were 2 medics, one of them older and apparently in charge, nearby when the masked man murdered them in cold blood to get at him. He then scowled as he ticked on another reason to find and destroy the masked man and silently promised to do his best to give his surrogate grandfather some closure on this. Yugao smiled sadly upon seeing the blonde's expression. It's not your fault, Naruto-kun. We'll find the one responsible, together, right? She asserted, making sure her friend didn't try to take this on all by himself. Naruto snapped out of his thoughts to stare at her for a moment before nodding hesitantly. Good. Moving on to the last one, Senju Tobirama, or the second Hokage. Master of the water element. Inventor of the Hiraishin Jutsu your father adapted and improved upon, not to mention many other jutsu. He also oversaw the biggest growth Konohagakure had ever seen as it moved from a gathering of clans to a true village. Many would argue he was a slightly better leader than the first, despite his flaws. There's a reason I saved him for last, though. Wow. Sounds like a total badass. Someone like him had to have at least one wife, right? Naruto said excitedly. You would think so, but he had one major and well-known flaw. What is it? Now he wasn't sure if he wanted to know as he watched a sinister smirk grow on Yugao's face. He was a goddamn man whore, she announced cheerily, enjoying Naruto's shocked reaction as he nearly faceplanted on the table where the hot plate was. What the hell? He was as close to a male prostitute as you could get without the money. Though there were rumors about some of his missions being straight-out prostitution to high-ranking noble ladies. He regularly slept with a different woman almost every week, and even with enemy kunoichi on missions. Despite being a known badass, he apparently feared only one thing, and that was commitment to only one woman. He even went as far to create an anti-pregnancy jutsu just to avoid being tied down with a child. With his reputation like that, no respectable woman wanted to touch him with a 10-foot pole. So that's what would happen if we somehow let Ero Sennin become Hokage. Naruto muttered, now recovered from his shock. That sent a chill down Yugao's spine, and she decided right there she would assassinate anyone who ever thought appointing Jiraiya as Hokage was a great idea. I guess I shouldn't adopt some elements of the second's outfit for my own when I graduate. He sounded like a badass, but do I want to be associated with a walking assortment of STDs? He wondered with a hand cupping his chin. Yugao, watching this, decided to tease him and adopted a saucy smirk. You should just go ahead with whatever you're planning. His good looks can't be denied, despite his less than stellar personality, so I'm sure you'll be more handsome using any element of his outfit. Plus, news will spread someday about your legendary stamina that can match even Gai San's. She slowly said the last sentence, her smirk still in place. Naruto snapped his gaze to her. Why is that important? He trailed off as a bright red blush slowly appeared on his cheeks when he realized what Yugao was implying with her sexy smirk, making her almost crack up. The Anbu was enjoying this too much. There's a reason why kunoichi usually preferred trained shinobi, not civilian men. Any civilian woman that caught the attention of a regular shinobi would feel like she won 10 lotteries at once. With you, I wouldn't be surprised if it felt like 1,000 lotteries for any woman. She whispered the last part seductively, and then put on her most predatory expression as she stared intently at her blonde victim, even licking her lips sensually for added effect. Why Yugao-chan? Naruto sputtered, dropping a piece of his meat onto the hot plate. He wouldn't look her in the eyes as he struggled to pick it back up, his entire face now bright red with steam coming out of his hair. Yugao wasn't able to hold it in and broke into hysterical laughter while he watched with a deadpan expression. Haha, sorry. That was too good to pass up. She finally said after taking a long moment to settle down. Naruto just grunted in annoyance before smiling to say it was all in good humor. What's bothering you about this? I support this because I know you deserve the love any woman will give you, especially with your stigma. You'll be powerful, yes, but you'll also have a hard life with strong enemies after you. You deserve to know that there will be many loved ones awaiting your return from each mission and battle instead of being alone. Yugao inquired after seeing Naruto's still unsure expression as he poked at some of his sizzling meat on the hot plate. It's just that Hinata-chan's strongly encouraging this. If she wanted me all to herself, I would have had no problem with that. However, she apparently believes I have the capacity to love more women, and that there will likely be many out there that deserve the same chance she's had with me. I don't know why she got that idea. Am I really any better than the next guy? He muttered. Yugao displayed a knowing smirk as she took a sip from her drink. You regularly leave very positive impressions on many women, including me. It comes so naturally to you without even trying, and Hinata-san has clearly seen that. She pointed out. Naruto raised a skeptical eyebrow as he stuffed several pieces of meat into his mouth. The purple-haired Anbu scoffed and brought her left hand up to count off his achievements with her index finger raised. You saved Hinata-san, and then her sister, from Kumo at an enormous risk to your life both times. In addition, the atmosphere within the Hyuga clan improved considerably with your continued presence. I've never seen so many relaxed Hyugas in the years since Lord Hyuga first welcomed you into the compound. Who knows what they would have been like now if it weren't for you. They'd probably have the same stick up the asses attitude like most of the Uchiha clan had. Well, they were kind of stiff in the beginning. Naruto admitted with a shrug. Yugao smirked before she continued and added her second finger. You selflessly saved Anko-chan from being raped. She also would have had decades of misery to look forward to if you hadn't destroyed the curse mark too. Before that night, I was very sure that one day she would have snapped and tried her best to get a quick and messy death somehow just to end her suffering. Because of that, You also saved me from my despair over continually worrying if she was even going to live through just one more day without giving in to that desire. Was it really that bad? Naruto murmured softly before Yugao slapping both hands sharply on her edge of the table surprised him and he stared at her wide-eyed. She wanted all of his attention on what she was about to say. There had to be absolutely no doubt in his mind about his importance to her surrogate sister. Uzumaki Naruto, believe me when I say I'm as certain as the sun rising from the east every day that you're the absolute greatest thing that ever happened to Anko-chan. She asserted heatedly as she leaned in, her voice thick and eyes slightly watery. There was silence between them for a moment before Naruto nodded his acceptance with a serious expression. Satisfied, Yugao blushed a little at her outburst, but she shook it off and moved on with her third finger added. I work with Inoichi-san often on sorting out usable pieces of intelligence from the useless drivel many times. He's a brilliant man, but he's also the epitome of the term, idiot parent. He talks about his daughter so much I wondered if I was gathering intelligence on the enemy, or Ino-san. Naruto had to chuckle at that. It was shortly after you and Ino-san enrolled in the academy that Inoichi-san began to tell me he was worried for his daughter. She wasn't taking her training seriously, instead preferring to diet excessively and focus on fashion in order to chase after fantasies of being assigned with the man of her dream and then get rescued by him whenever she got into trouble on missions. I might have somewhat understood if her fantasies were about you, but instead it was about that little Uchiha boy. She spat out the last 3 words with venom. As a woman who trained herself extensively to be a strong kunoichi from the very beginning, she always disliked what fangirls represented, but hated those who let undeserved fame go to their heads even more. In addition, there was a clear difference between the little boy, Sasuke, and the young man, Naruto to her and many other people, that she was stunned someone as smart as Ino had never seen the obvious until recently. Especially when she heard about how that spoiled brat antagonized Naruto throughout the academy years just because of his inferiority complex. She also realized just now that little bastard called one of her idols a whore when he insulted Naruto's mother before getting the epic beatdown he deserved that day. She made a mental note to stab Sasuke if he ever got out of line around her from now on. In the balls. Repeatedly. She added. Don't tell me you didn't daydream even just once about your boyfriend heroically rescuing you from the bad guys, Yugao-chan. Naruto prodded teasingly. Yugao flinched and turned her gaze away with a slight blush before clearing her throat. Ahem, moving on. She muttered as she narrowed her eyes in annoyance at the blonde's victorious smirk on getting a little revenge for her earlier teasing. For a couple years, this kept up and I actually began to wonder if any female from your year, aside from Hinata-san, was going to survive her first serious mission out of the village. Then one day, Inoichi-san came into the headquarters rather ecstatic. It turned out Ino-san suddenly began to eat properly and took her training seriously, and I learned it was all thanks to you. She said gently and Naruto looked away sheepishly. There are many more examples I could bring up but these were the major ones I could think of. Oh, I also shouldn't forget that cute blonde girl from Suna. Yugao added casually as she raised her 4th finger and Naruto snapped his head to her at the mention of that girl. His visible eye focused intensely on her, making her shiver slightly in awe of how much his eye patch added to his overall presence, even after a few months of getting used to the new look. Tamari-san. What does this have to do with her? To be honest, I was doing guard duty in the office the last time the Kazekage came to visit Hokage-sama for some business. I cannot repeat the details, but I can at least tell you both your names came up often in their conversation. Naruto leaned back before letting out a sharp exhale. He then ran a hand through his hair in clear frustration. Well, if it's secret then I'm not going to press you on this. However, this just made some of the things the Kazekage said to me after that meeting even more confusing. I understand, Naruto-kun. I just wanted you to know you apparently have made a lasting impression on the Kazekage's daughter as well. Naruto narrowed his eye in thought for a long moment. If any woman I meet in my life feels I deserve even a little bit of her love for any reason and I like her, I would give it a shot. To be honest, there are a couple girls I genuinely like in addition to Hinata-chan and I thought it'd be nice if they returned my feelings as well. He said fondly. Yugao knew right away one of these girls was Anko. It was so obvious between those two. However, she was glad to get an actual confirmation from Naruto on this, even if Anko's name wasn't directly mentioned just yet. Why not go after them now? She helpfully suggested. Naruto suddenly looked nervous and bashful at that notion with red cheeks, which made her nearly squeal out loud since she found this sight utterly adorable. I'm still getting used to the idea of having just one girlfriend in Hinata-chan. I just think it'd be best if I don't try anything for a little while longer. There's also the fact any girl would have to understand I'm with Hinata-chan and whoever else and then decide for herself if I'm still worth going after. I'm not going to force anything on them, he said firmly. Yugao nodded, pleased with his answer. Well, thank you for clearing all of this up with me. I'm done eating. You still up for that spar? He prodded as he patted his stomach. Of course, she chirped as she deactivated the privacy seal and rang the room's bell for a waitress to bring the bill. Later at the Purple Sisters' apartment, a sweat-covered Yugao opened the front door and stepped inside on shaky legs. He really made me work for my win this time. Cammy, I can't stand those stabs of his. She quipped to no one in particular as she gently rested her sheathed ninjutsu against the wall next to the door. She then peeled her sweat-drenched shirt off and carelessly tossed it aside, revealing a tight white tank top underneath along with a very generous amount of cleavage. She made her way into the kitchen to prepare a glass of water. At that moment, the door to a bedroom creaked open to reveal a sleepy-looking Anko in just her red tank top and a pair of red and white striped panties, and her hair was down and messy. She yawned loudly before stumbling into the kitchen like a zombie. She then noticed Yugao through bleary eyes. Mornin', Yugao ne. Naruto tire you out again, huh? She mumbled as she noted Yugao's ragged appearance. She then began to prepare some strong tea to wake herself up. Yugao nodded before frowning. You mean afternoon. You slept in rather late. Last mission kept me awake for at least 50 hours. Anko retorted, referring to a high-speed VIP escort mission that took her and a client from Land of Hot Springs to here without any rest. She had just gotten back around midnight. How's he? She continued as she began to boil some water. Yugao shrugged. He's doing fine. He stopped by the office this morning to see Hokage-sama for some issue about a certain clan bylaw. She answered, and noticed that got Anko's attention as she observed one of the younger woman's eyebrows twitch. Anko didn't say anything more as she silently prepared her tea. Yugao shrugged again with a smirk before moving into the living room to sit on the chair. She took a couple gulps out of her glass of cold water in silence while Anko finished making her tea. Finally, the clearly impatient woman briskly made her way into the living room with her cup. She sat down a little forcefully on the nearby couch and began to stare intensely at Yugao, who was still nonchalantly drinking her water. Out with it. You kept Naruto-kun's lineage from me for over a year. I think I'm entitled to keep quiet about this for a couple minutes longer. Yugao shot back with mock defiance. You finally figured that out. I bet he still had to hold your hand through that shocking revelation. Anko teased as she raised her cup to her lips, and knew she got it right when Yugao shifted her gaze away in obvious embarrassment. If it helps, I'm just too brilliant compared to all of you. I'm the first and probably still the only one to have figured this out by myself. Anko continued with mock arrogance. Yugao scoffed. Look at the ego on this little girl. They delved into laughter and teasing for a few minutes until Yugao finally let out a sigh. Yes, that bylaw involves clan restoration like you're apparently thinking. She finally conceded. Anything interesting? Hinata-san is apparently encouraging him to keep an eye out for more women. Bet he acted uninterested about this for a bit before giving in. Anko suggested with a smirk. That's not what I gathered from my lunch with him. He's taking this quite seriously and it doesn't seem like he'll go after every pretty woman that caught his attention. He has to genuinely feel affection for them before he would consider anything. I have good news for you in that regard. Yugao announced, and she grinned as she watched Anko lean forward in anticipation. He really does like you. I've always seen that, but he just about said it outright today. Anko's eyes widened for a moment, before softening with a small smile growing on her face. That idiot, liking a woman who's older than him and far out of his league. She said softly as she leaned back into the couch. Yugao scoffed. Something's wrong with you if you actually think that. As an overall package, even I find him very attractive, and I'm a little older than you. He'll be even more handsome and powerful in almost no time. He's mature beyond his years, he's fun to be around, he cares about his friends very strongly, and I know he'll take on the entire world to protect his loved ones. If I didn't love Hayate-kun so much, I'd probably be by your side going after him. She admitted with a slight blush, and Anko stared at her with an eyebrow cocked in amusement. What? The Anbu challenged, daring her surrogate sister to say otherwise. Anko grinned knowingly before taking another sip. At the rate he's going, I wouldn't be shocked if even Tsunade-sama, who's in her 50s and regularly beats up every man who ever looked at her wrong, found him irresistible. Also, I wasn't being clear. Naruto has Ino-chan and Hinata-chan, two beautiful and rich clan heiresses the same age as him, hot and bothered for him. What do I have to offer in comparison to them? Anko murmured uncertainly, clearly believing she was the one who didn't deserve Naruto's affection. Yugao smiled softly. Aside from your amazing beauty, the fact you're one of this village's strongest kunoichi, and how he clearly sees your fun and affectionate personality underneath your tough exterior. There hasn't been a reason for me to doubt Naruto-kun's ability to judge anyone's character. In the end, you're apparently doing everything right because he cares for you a lot. Anko blushed before scoffing. Look at me, I'm not even bothering to hide how much I love him anymore. How pathetic. You weren't doing a good job in the first place anyway. Don't remind me. I think I just need more time, since I want to be absolutely sure of this. It's just hard to swallow the fact Naruto would love other women as much as he would me. Plus, he saved me from those bastards and the curse mark. That kind of thing would skewer a woman's opinion of even the worst scum in the world. Hell, my panties still get soaked every time I remember the details of how he systematically destroyed those pigs to rescue me. Anko said with a soft smile that spoke volumes about exactly how she felt toward a certain blonde. Yugao chuckled and reached over to pat a hand on the younger woman's thigh for reassurance. Anko-chan, you know as well I do that him saving you is only a tiny part of why you feel the way you do for him. For now, just take the time to sort out your feelings. Naruto-kun's still getting used to the idea of having multiple women, and won't be ready to try anything with another girl for a little while anyway. Quote. Anko nodded silently. Yugao wasn't finished yet, though. However, I'll tell you from my experiences with Hayate-kun that receiving someone's love is one of the greatest feelings a woman, even if she's the most powerful kunoichi in the world, could ever have. Don't deny yourself 1 second longer than you have to when the day comes you feel you're absolutely ready for this. When? Don't you mean, if? Anko quizzed with a raised eyebrow. Yugao smiled and shook her head. Considering what I've been seeing between you two lately, I'm definitely sticking with, when, she asserted before she drank some more from her glass of water. Anko blushed again with an annoyed frown, but didn't retort as she took another sip from her tea. She then slowly smiled as she allowed herself to think about one Uzumaki Naruto. Later that evening after sparring with Yugao, Naruto returned home to shower then took a quick nap. After waking up, he decided to go out for another walk around the village in a comfortable civilian outfit of dark blue shorts and white t-shirt with the orange Uzumaki spiral on its back. That was when he came across Hinata and Hanabi doing their shopping in the market district. They were dressed in matching civilian outfits of a long-sleeved blouse and black capris each. The only difference was that Hinata selected light blue as the color for her top while Hanabi picked white. Apparently it was one of the girls' turn to cook tonight as he noted their shopping bags filled with fresh ingredients. Grinning mischievously since they haven't noticed him yet, he decided to surprise them by using his advanced stealth skills to sneak up behind them. Yo! He called out rather loudly right behind the two unaware girls when he followed them to an almost empty side street. They yelped in surprise and quickly turned around with their hands snapping into defensive positions. They forgot they were holding the bags of ingredients, and they all flew off into the air between the two parties. Fortunately for the girls, Naruto nonchalantly caught all the falling bags before they hit the ground while wearing a shit-eating grin. I would be honored to carry your bags for you tonight, my fair ladies. He continued nonchalantly with a bright smile, pointedly ignoring the annoyed glares from Hinata and Hanabi. That wasn't funny, the younger sister grumbled as she smacked a hand on his stomach. The elder sister just looked away with her cheeks puffed out cutely in annoyance. Naruto chuckled as he fell into step between the girls and they continued walking into the large and isolated clan's district. The Hyuga sisters didn't stay annoyed with the blonde for long and they began chatting about their day. It wasn't long before Hinata wrapped her arms around Naruto's left arm and sighed happily as she leaned her head on his shoulder. Incredible warmth and contentment flooded throughout his body and she was apparently feeling the same, if her satisfied expression was any indication. He thought back to the popular topic of the day and wondered if Anko, Ino, or whoever else would cause him to feel this way as well. The blonde then noticed with a sweat drop that Hanabi was maintaining her stoic Hyuga facade for the most part as she walked stiffly next to the couple. However, he knew what was coming when they were about to enter the long and private walkway leading to several clan compounds in the rear of the district, one of them belonging to the Hyuga clan. It was lined on both sides with tall and thick trees that provided thick cover overhead. From that point onward, anyone walking down this way would be safe from public's prying eyes. As if on cue when the threesome stepped past the threshold, Hanabi immediately dropped her facade and turned to Naruto with the best puppy eyes she could muster. Naruto flinched in terror at how quickly a girl could change her personality so easily. He knew what she wanted. "Aren't you getting too old for that?" he suggested with an amused smirk. Hanabi grinned wide and shook her head, whipping her long and straight black hair around. "Never with you, Oni-chan. Even 20 years from now," she exclaimed as she continued her assault with her puppy eyes. Hinata giggled cutely on Naruto's other side. He turned to her innocently smiling expression. "You're her older sister. Aren't you going to scold her for not being proper?" "Now, why would I? We have privacy now and you two are so adorable together." Hinata giggled again as she squeezed his arm. Naruto sighed exasperatedly. "You know we get weird looks from the rest of your clan whenever we do this. It's not our problem if it bothers them, Oni-chan. It's not like you hate it, or do you?" Hanabi mumbled the last few words dejectedly as she looked down to the ground. Naruto felt his resolve breaking, even though he knew this girl was blatantly toying with his emotions to get what she wanted. "Oi, enough with your crocodile tears. Sheesh, hop on," he grumbled resignedly as he handed the bags in his right hand to Hinata for the moment and shifted it palm up as he held it low in front of his hips. The small and slim Hanabi let out an excited squeal as she took a quick running start and nimbly hopped on the proffered hand as if it was a foothold with her left foot. Using the temporary foothold with a boost from Naruto, she launched herself straight up with a backward flip into the air and she was suddenly upside down directly above the blonde with a one-handed handstand on the top of his head. The blonde was still walking nonchalantly, not bothered by the young Hyuga's sudden maneuver. It was obvious she had done this often before. Hanabi couldn't contain a happy laugh as she balanced herself and briefly stretched out her legs and her free arm as far out as they went like a circus performer. It was clear the young heiress had an amazingly nimble and agile body. She then gently maneuvered herself into sitting down on Naruto's shoulders facing forward. At that point, her new rider retrieved the bags back from Hinata and continued onward as if she wasn't suddenly riding high up on his shoulders now. She was smiling brightly as she began to gently rake her fingers through his soft hair. Hinata wasn't able to resist cooing at the cute sight. "So how's it going in the academy now that you're a full-time student, Hanabi-chan?" Naruto asked. Hanabi initially began her first year part-time since she was still receiving private lessons. However, she changed her mind and wanted to go full-time this term to have better chances in making friends. Hanabi's hands stopped in his hair for a brief moment before resuming. "It's kind of boring, Oni-chan. You, father, and my tutors have already taught me everything they've covered so far in class. It's unbelievable how many of my classmates still doesn't know how to mold chakra properly yet," she murmured. Naruto and Hinata glanced at each other and smiled, as they understood how she was feeling. "Hinata-chan and I already knew a lot when we enrolled. We made the most of it and enjoyed our time because we were with friends." "Have you met anyone?" the blonde said. Hanabi's face lit up as she remembered meeting several of her peers. "I guess so. There's this girl named Moegi, and I think we'll be friends at least. There's also Udon and he seems intelligent and friendly, if not a little wimpy. We all ate lunch together once in a while. However, there's this boy I'll never ever get along with." She forcefully declared the last sentence as if it was the one certain rule of the universe. "Era, what has he done wrong?" Hinata said lightly with a smile as she exchanged another glance with Naruto. He's annoying and arrogant. He only comes to class once or twice per week because he gets special lessons, the rest of the time from this stuck-up Tokubetsu Junin who wears sunglasses all the time. Even indoors. Any time he did come in, every other phrase he uttered was about how he was going to beat up the Hokage and take his hat. He wasn't quiet about it either. He's the reason I switched to full-time. I must have been considered a spoiled princess by my classmates when I only attended once per week in the last term. An odd and heavy feeling settled itself in the pit of one Uzumaki Naruto's stomach. It felt like he had just realized he chose the right paths in his life and managed to dodge a figurative kunai with regard to being an annoying loudmouthed moron. He wasn't able to comprehend why he had that feeling all of a sudden, though. You're not the only one. I just had this feeling I was stubbornly bitter and angry with you for many more years instead. Why would I do that to someone I'm essentially bonded with for his life? Then again, if you were actually a loud-mouthed moron, it's probably justified. Kurama suddenly spoke up with a confused tone. I wouldn't blame you either if I ended up being that annoying. What was his name? Hinata queried softly, cutting into Naruto's thoughts. I don't know. I don't think anyone does. All we know is that he's the grandson of the third Toki-sensei and that stuck-up glasses idiot wouldn't call him anything other than honorable grandson. Konohamaru. Naruto interjected, drawing the sister's attention to him. That's his name. I haven't met him but Hokage Jiji talked about him sometimes. He clarified before looking up into Hanabi's inquisitive expression. Hanabi-chan, please do me a favor. Make sure all of your classmates know his real name. Trust me, it's for his benefit. Why? Do you remember when I said I didn't know my own name for the first 5 years of my life? It was always, monster, demon, demon brat, and many other things. I only found out my name when Hokage Jiji picked me up after the orphanage kicked me out. He explained as he felt Hanabi's hands clench in his hair. In addition, Hinata buried her face in his shoulder and squeezed his arm tightly. He knew they hated hearing about his previous treatment but they needed to understand this. I wanted recognition, my own identity. I was happy and proud to be known as Uzumaki Naruto, the day Hokage Jiji explained to me that I wasn't supposed to be called those other names. Konohamaru might not have had the same life as I did but I can easily imagine how he's feeling if everyone kept insisting on calling him honorable grandson. It just told people that he's the grandson of a Hokage. So what? I think he's just looking for his own recognition by trying to beat up even his own grandfather and become Hokage so they'd at last call him by his real name. There was silence as the girls let Naruto's words sink in, and they were now walking up to the Hyuga compound's entrance. I understand, Oni-chan. I'll make sure everyone calls him by his true name. However, it doesn't change the fact he's still annoying, though. Hanabi huffed as she defiantly crossed her arms, and the others chuckled. They arrived at the gate and Naruto had to deal with the guards' amused expressions as they watched him pass by with Hanabi still riding on his shoulders. See if they can deal with your sister's manipulations better than I, he grumbled to a smiling Hinata as they walked toward Hiyashi's house. Hanabi smirked as she bent over his head to lock her pale eyes with Naruto's single one. That's a strong accusation, Oni-chan. What evidences do you have that I've been manipulating you? I have a very long list and it'll take weeks to go through it all. The heiresses giggled at Naruto's deadpanned retort just as they arrived at their destination. Hanabi reluctantly hopped off the blonde, quipping that his hair was too fluffy to stop playing with, and he was quickly invited in for dinner. After dinner in the formal dining room, your seared salmon and roasted potatoes were fantastic, Hanabi-chan. You're going to make your future husband happy someday. Naruto exclaimed as he patted his stomach. The Hyuga sisters were sitting across the large Japanese-style dining table from him. Hinata smiled and nodded her agreement while Hanabi blushed prettily at the compliment. Hiyashi, who was kneeling at the head of the table, had just finished eating as well and carefully put his chopsticks down across the plate. Indeed, Naruto-san is correct. Like how quickly you are taking after your elder sister in Gentle Fist, I am pleased to say the same for your cooking as well, Hanabi. He complimented sincerely. Hanabi beamed and it would have been impossible to wipe the smile off her face for the rest of the evening. Hiyashi then raised an eyebrow in the direction of a suddenly wary Naruto, who sensed an uncomfortable topic coming up. Speaking of husbands, would Hinata eventually be your only wife, or shall I expect to hear about more? Naruto-san, he queried, barely hiding his smirk knowing he was going to enjoy the reactions from the couple. Naruto almost spat out the tea he just sipped and coughed, while Hinata kept her gaze focused on her lap as her entire face turned a startling shade of red at the mention of being married to Naruto. It wasn't that she was embarrassed, instead, she was imagining what would happen on the wedding night, then the next morning, in the following afternoon, and so on. She had to fight off a nosebleed. Hanabi raised both eyebrows in surprise since she had the clan bylaws drilled into her head recently and she knew her father was referring to clan restoration. Oni-chan was actually part of a clan. After coughing for a moment, the blonde then let out a short chuckle. I shouldn't have been surprised you'd know about my parents. How long, Hiyashi-sama? Many years. Since the day you first visited this compound, to be precise. It was an educated guess I made with my brother in the beginning, but I became convinced of its validity as time passed. The traits of Minato-san and Kushina-san, both physical and personality, were too ingrained into you for it to be a coincidence. Oni-chan, may I ask about your parents? I don't believe I may have heard about anyone named Minato or Kushina. Hanabi inquired softly, wondering why Naruto was being encouraged to take on multiple wives instead of only her sister like she originally thought. His parents apparently came from powerful clans to warrant the use of that bylaw. It seems your tutors were inadequate in their lessons, Hanabi. At least when it came to learning the actual names of famous figures in this village's history. Hiyashi muttered with furrowed eyebrows while Naruto smirked. I wouldn't have paid attention to their names if they weren't my parents. Their monikers were much cooler. That is to be expected of you, Naruto-san. Please do not put my daughters, who are far more intelligent, on the same level as you. Hiyashi retorted dryly before smirking amusedly when Naruto slumped over in depression at the jab. The sisters giggled at the banter while the blonde grumbled. Well, who were they? The younger sister pressed. Naruto grinned foxily as he removed his eye patch, revealing the handsome ice blue Sharingan that made the girls blush briefly. I want to burn this next part into my memory. Why? Hanabi queried as she cutely tilted her head to one side. If Hinata-chan's reaction was any indication, this is going to be a good one too. Naruto chuckled as Hinata covered her face with both hands in embarrassment at the reminder. A long time ago, the Uzumaki clan used to be so large and strong that it ran its own village in the former land of whirlpools. They were famous for their skills in fuinjutsu and battle. Their most well-known traits were enhanced healing, long life spans, and massive chakra reserves with unique properties. All containers of the fox, including me, were all Uzumakis solely because of that last trait. The clan prospered until it was invaded and destroyed in the Second Great War because their enemies feared the power they held. Most of the clan perished in that incident and the rest were scattered into the world. My mother was lucky enough to have been here in Konoha when this happened, and her name was Uzumaki Kushina. She was a beautiful and famous kunoichi feared throughout the nations for her skills with fuinjutsu and a special brand of jutsu called chakra chains. She had several nicknames, but her most famous one was red-hot-blooded habanero. He began fondly, clearly remembering all he heard about his mother. Hanabi's eyebrows shot up as high as they went. She clearly recognized that moniker. My father was Namikaze Minato. Not much was known about his family name since dad lost all of his relatives when he was young, according to Ero Sennin. Despite all that, he had excellent genes and grew up to be a powerful shinobi that just about single-handedly won the Third Great War for Konoha. At this point, Hanabi's pale eyes widened to epic proportions and she looked like she was about to hyperventilate. I see you've caught on. Yes, I'm the son of the Yellow Flash, also known as the fourth Hokage who saved this village from disaster on the day of my birth. Unfortunately, it was at the cost of his life, as well as my mother's. Therefore, being the last known heir of a once powerful clan basically requires me to ensure its continued survival. Plus, the fact my father was a Hokage will help strengthen the line for the future too with my Namikaze side. The best way to do that is to find and fall in love with multiple women in order to have many children and raise them together to increase the chances of my family's traits continuing onward to future generations. Thud. That was the dull sound Hanabi's body made with the floor as she limply fell backward from the table in a dead faint. Hinata was already at her little sister's side fussing while Hiyashi exasperatedly shook his head with a quiet chuckle. Naruto laughed heartily as he put the eye patch back on. That'll never get old. Soon outside on the rear porch, do you remember when you formally requested permission to court my eldest daughter after you recovered from your injuries? Hiyashi suddenly asked as he took a sip from his cup of warm sake. He was sitting on the edge of the porch as he enjoyed the eerie but beautiful night view of his large and private backyard, which was a large Zen-style garden with a sparring ring in the middle that was used for training. Elegantly carved stone torches peppered the garden to cast a dim and eerie glow everywhere. Splashing were heard from a nearby koi pond as its fish were in a feeding frenzy due to Naruto sprinkling a handful of feed into the water. It was just the two of them since Hinata was bathing with Hanabi and putting her to bed afterward. He dusted his hands before turning toward Hiyashi with a deadpan expression. Of course I do. I was a nervous wreck. Even though I felt you'd be okay with us dating, I was half expecting you to challenge me to a deathmatch for Hinata-chan's hand. He chuckled before abruptly putting on an annoyed expression. Instead, you stared at me with that blank expression, as if to say, about goddamn time you realized her feelings. Before basically saying we're free to do whatever we want as long as we were responsible about it. What the hell? You had to know what that statement meant. You're like the worst overprotective father ever, he exclaimed bluntly while pointing dramatically at the clan head. Hiyashi cracked a rare smile, indicating to Naruto that he had just made the stoic clan head do something equivalent to laughing out heartily. Were it anyone else, I would have, as you said, challenged him to a deathmatch, and I would put everything I have into wiping that person's existence off the face of this planet. Hiyashi spoke seriously with a bloodthirsty glare at imagining someone other than Naruto daring to go within 20 meters of either of his daughters. Naruto gulped at the clan head's expression and was glad he somehow managed to get on this powerful man's good side from the very beginning. Hiyashi turned toward the blonde with a gentle expression. However, you have made a father's most important, but near impossible, job infinitely easier when it came to ensuring my daughter's greatest happiness with the right man. I also trust the both of you to be mature enough to decide for yourselves on how and when to advance your relationship each step. Besides, even if I wished to play the role of an overprotective father, for my own amusement at your expense, Hiyashi briefly paused to enjoy an annoyed glare from the blonde. It would be foolish of me to get between my daughter and her romantic interest. He purposely slipped up on the last statement, making Naruto stare at him blankly. He knew exactly what the clan head was implying. I have a feeling there's something about Hinata-chan I haven't discovered yet, have I? He finally said after a moment. Hiyashi smiled again and Naruto frantically checked the sky to see if it was going to turn blood red as a sign of an upcoming apocalypse. The stoic Hyuga clan head had just smiled fully twice in one day. Shaking it off, he turned his gaze to the side with an uncertain expression. Putting that aside, we're currently just boyfriend and girlfriend. I would be honored if Hinata-chan finds me worthy to be her husband because I now can't really imagine my future without her at my side, but that's still up to her. Hiyashi raised an eyebrow exasperatingly at this young man's surprisingly low confidence in his high desirability to women in general. His thoughts echoed the popular and spoken opinion of the day. It would take a cruel and unfeeling god to separate my daughter from you at this point. Even if that did happen, I would bet the entire clan's wealth on Hinata tearing apart the deity for even daring to attempt that foolishness. Getting back to my original question, did you know you may have to take on multiple partners at that time? Hiyashi neutrally asked. Naruto became really nervous about answering questions relating to his odd situation, especially when the powerful father of his first girlfriend was asking them. Naruto-san, it is perfectly fine to answer anything I may ask. I am merely curious. Hiyashi assured gently as he took another sip. Naruto nodded and seemed to take solace in that. Hinata-chan alluded to that bylaw when we confessed to each other, but I never really gave it much thought until she finally sat me down the other night and we discussed this thoroughly. At the time I was asking your permission, I didn't really have a clue my lineage would be so troublesome. He muttered the last word like a certain Nara. Hiyashi smiled gently as he could tell Naruto was going to take this very seriously and carefully consider anything that may happen to avoid unnecessary issues with Hinata and whomever else he would have his eyes on. Shall I assume that I would be expecting to hear about other women in your life alongside my daughter? I'll be upfront with you. There are at least 2 other girls I feel I could love as much as I do Hinata-chan someday. I have no idea how it'll work out with them, but I'm going to give this a try. Naruto said firmly as he looked into Hiyashi's eyes with conviction. Your statement and expression helped answer quite a few of my questions at once. To be honest, I have to admit I am somewhat relieved you may be considering this. Why? The blonde asked, puzzled. It has to do with my deceased wife's family medical history. We will discuss that in the future. For now, it is not something you need to concern yourself with. Naruto knew a dismissal when he heard one, so he nodded his acceptance easily. He furrowed his eyebrows deep in thought for a moment before locking eyes with Hiyashi's. You know there will be some public backlash if this gets out. I'm still not popular in the village and they will not hold back in calling your daughter and any other woman names, or even do something worse, for being part of the demon's harem. He spat out the last two words in disgust. I would not worry too much about this. It is easy enough for you to keep this hidden from them for the time being. Would it be safe to assume you will have your parentage publicly announced eventually? Yeah, when I make Chunin, since that's when I'll get everything my parents left me. No way anyone wouldn't notice that. Why? As a politician, I understand how easily the public's perception of anything can change overnight. When it is announced you are the fourth son, what do you think will happen then if it gets out that you are searching for multiple partners to restore your clans? Naruto frowned when it clicked for him. Were most of these people that stupid? They'd most likely praise my efforts to make the village stronger for future generations instead. He growled out in annoyance. You understand then, Naruto-san. Until when the time has come to pass, I believe you do know a thing or two about discretion. Hiyashi replied almost playfully with a small smirk. Naruto huffed out a small laugh. Yeah, just a little bit, Hiyashi-sama. He retorted with a foxy smirk that made the spine of every single Anbu in service to the Hokage shiver with alarm at that precise moment. Hiyashi slowly stood up. I shall retire for the evening. I believe my daughter wishes to spend some time with you. Have a good night, Naruto-san. He said with a small bow of his head in which Naruto returned. A squeak of, eep, was heard from behind the rear door into the house that made the clan head and blonde smirk in amusement. Hiyashi slid the door open to reveal a demure and red-faced Hinata caught eavesdropping so easily. She was wrapped up in a simple lavender-colored yukata typically worn around the house in the evenings to cover up her nightwear. Anyo, good night, father. She mumbled with her blush intensifying, unable to look anyone in the eyes for the moment. Good night, my daughter. Hiyashi replied with an amused grin as he swapped places with Hinata and slid the door closed to leave her and Naruto alone on the porch. So how much of that did you hear? Naruto queried with a teasing smile. Hinata grumbled a little as she moved to sit on the porch with Naruto joining her. He then wrapped his right arm around her to allow her to snuggle into his side. Since you accused him of being the worst overprotective father ever. She replied with a small giggle as she laid her head on her boyfriend's shoulder. The couple enjoyed several minutes of comfortable silence taking in the night view of the Zen garden before them, before Hinata broke it. I love you so much that any future that doesn't result in the two of us being together for the rest of our lives would be meaningless, Naruto-kun. She spoke with total conviction as she locked her gaze with the surprised blondes. However, it didn't take him long to recover with a happy grin and gave her a quick peck on the temple, making her smile. I love you too, Hinata-chan. I'm sorry for thinking things could change between us. It's just that I was wondering if we were two. He was silenced by a brief and chaste kiss on his lips. He wasn't complaining though. We left a lot of our childhood behind a long time ago when we began training to kill, sabotage, and protect in Konohagakure's name. You've already killed so many times, for Kami's sake. Can you honestly say we aren't mature enough to reach this point already? Hinata argued as she drew back. Naruto let out a defeated sigh. Now that you said it like that, it's pointless to say we're too young to think seriously about our future when I'm not going to even mean it. He conceded with a grin. It won't be long before we put our Hitai Atesh on and go out into the world as adults. Time would fly by quickly at that point and there will be constant danger everywhere. I can see why many shinobi and kunoichi preferred to decide on their futures long before they even reached 16. We're only a couple years away from that age ourselves. I wonder what'll happen by then. Hinata smiled playfully as she snuggled more into his side. You will be one of the strongest shinobi in the nations. I can also imagine quite a few more new women in your life as well. Then you'll be one of the strongest, and the most beautiful, kunoichi around. Naruto returned cheekily, making her blush happily, before he thought more on what she said earlier. You sound rather confident on the bit about these women. He pointed out with a skeptical eyebrow as he began to rake his hand through her long and silky indigo hair, making her eyes flutter blissfully at the pleasant ministration. It didn't escape her notice that he didn't dispute her on the strongest shinobi bit. Kami, his amazing confidence is so like him, and a major turn on too. I just know it'll happen. After all, I've known you since we were 7. I would have to be blind if I haven't noticed the effect you have on other women over the years, and you weren't even trying. You were just being your utterly wonderful self, Naruto-kun. Now that you're getting to be old enough, more will take notice of you and try to earn your attention from now on. Naruto couldn't help but blush slightly in embarrassment at his girlfriend's high opinion of him. You know, it's all right for you to be selfish just this once and keep me all to yourself if that's what you truly want. Hinata slowly reached up to carefully pry his eye patch off, revealing the gentle ice blue glow of the hidden eye in the growing darkness of the backyard, now that the torch's allocated fuel were running out for the night. He didn't offer any resistance, knowing the secret was safe here. She spent a long moment staring up into both of his eyes, feeling content and safe as she momentarily lost herself in their affectionate gaze. She wondered if Ino, Anko, or any other woman was going to feel this way with him too. It's not a matter of being selfish or generous. I just have this feeling we'd be even happier in the end if we go down this path. There will be problems along the way and it'll be hard work, but I just think it'll end up being the best thing for all of us. To me, it feels like this could easily be one large and very loving family instead of an impersonal collection of wives and children who want little to do with each other. So, you're basing all of this on a hunch? Naruto replied with an amused glint in his Sharingan, almost making her practically melt. I believe it to be much closer to truth when it comes to you, Naruto-kun. She said impishly. She then shifted her body around a little in his arms so she was almost completely front to front with him, making him fully aware of her already well-developed body pressing tightly against his, since the fabric of her yukata was thin. As he blushed at the sudden intimate contact, she used the distraction to sneak in a long kiss against his undefended neck, making him gasp. She then finished it off with a gentle yank of his shirt's collar down followed by a nibble on his exposed collarbone, making him shiver in surprise at the sudden but amazing tingling jolt that shot through him like lightning. It took Naruto a long moment to recover from his daze. When he came back to reality, he noted Hinata giggling quietly at his reaction and tightened his arm around her, making sure she wasn't able to escape. As if she actually wanted to. He narrowed his eyes playfully upon seeing her mischievous grin as he gently brushed her long hair away from her neck. His left eye easily memorized the pale and creamy skin of her long and delicate-looking neck, now exposed to the dim glow of the Zen garden's dying torches. Obviously wanting the favor returned, the young heiress instinctively tilted her head to the side for easier access. He then leaned in slowly, making her eyes close and her breathing hitch with anticipation. Gee, you're embarrassing me with your praises. You're going to regret giving me a big head over this, Hinata-chan. He whispered into her ear before he retaliated with a light and slow ghosting of his slightly rough lips on her very inviting neck all the way from the shoulder up to the jawline, making her gasp and squirm, before ending with a tantalizing butterfly kiss on her pulse point. His warm breath didn't help either. She had to bite back a loud moan as her body trembled with the amazing sensations that spread through her entire body. As he drew back, he was glad to have seen the half-lidded expression of Hinata holding back her obvious pleasure, since it was now burned into his memory with the Sharingan, especially since she was biting her lower lip adorably. He was going to enjoy seeing that memory whenever he thought of her. As the sensations faded away, way too soon in her opinion, Hinata let out a heavy exhale, as she took a moment to retain her sanity. Anyo, can you honestly imagine Anko-chan being happier with any other man? What about Ino-chan? She returned as she recovered from Naruto's attack. She then was amused to note a dark frown flash across Naruto's face, and his glowing eye took on a sharp quality for a brief moment. If that's what they want, who am I to stop them? He managed to get out without snarling possessively at that very thought. Hinata grinned before looking directly into her boyfriend's eyes. This is the part where I'm truly being selfish. I do not want them to ever be touched, even platonically, by other men. The only man I want them to be with in every way possible is you. Naruto was surprised by the intensity in her pale eyes, before he began to chuckle. I can understand your feelings about Ino-chan, since you two were great friends for years. However, it's hard to believe you and Anko-chan were at each other's throats just a while ago, with the way you're talking about her now. Time can change anything. I can also clearly see what kind of effect you have on each other. After all she's been through, she deserves her happiness, and if she decides it would be with you, I want us to welcome her with open arms. Hinata replied shyly, and he nodded, feeling more reassured that she was actually fine with him pursuing other women. Things fell silent between the two of them for a long minute as they continued to enjoy each other's presence until Naruto made his thoughts known. Knowing Anko-chan, she'd rather take her time on this. Even though she acts like she'd jump headfirst into any situation, she's actually a pretty careful person. She guards her heart very strongly, so I think it's best I let her have all the time to decide what she wants to do with this. I'll bet Yugao-chan told her about what we've discussed on restoring my clans over lunch by now, so she has enough facts about this situation. All that's left is for her to eventually decide if she wants to do this or not. I'm not going to say or do anything to push this along. I'll then respect whatever decision she makes, and enjoy our friendship at the very least. He decided with what he knew from several years with the purple-haired woman. Hinata nodded her acceptance. You really are a good man. She whispered, much to the blonde's small embarrassment. I hope that's not the same approach you'll take with Ino-chan, though. She's growing impatient and she clearly wants to be yours. However, I'm not sure what's holding her back. She added in her normal voice with a curious expression. Naruto smiled knowingly. She's trying to reach a milestone of sorts with me. I wouldn't be surprised when she does reach her goal, she'd have felt she was ready to move on. Hinata's expression changed to one of realization. I see. I now understand. She always believed she was the weakest of our study group, no matter how much we told her that didn't really matter. Funny thing is, Ino-chan already made it not too long ago, but I felt I had to help her reach for a higher place she didn't think existed in the first place. With that in mind, I kind of changed up some things without her knowing. Naruto replied with a short chuckle before turning a little nervous. I just hope she won't be too pissed when she finds out. Well, if it was to help her, she'll forgive you easily, Naruto-kun. Hinata replied with a small giggle, which didn't really help calm Naruto that much. They fell into contemplative silence once again as they enjoyed the starry sky above the now pitch-black backyard. Naruto's Sharingan was the only light source on the ground with its faint ice-blue glow. Say, as much as I'd prefer to be sure that any girl truly likes me before I make any assumption, why did you tell me about Ino-chan's feelings, and Anko-chan's as well? Isn't it in many women's nature to make the guy figure it out himself? Naruto suddenly asked. Hinata raised her head off his chest with a quirked eyebrow directed at him. Did you really have to ask, Naruto-kun? Oi. I would have noticed their feelings too. Eventually. He muttered lamely in weak defense. Hinata smiled gently as she put her right hand on his chest, directly over his beating heart. Naruto-kun, I've had my eyes on you ever since my admiration for you began soon after you saved me from being abducted and then befriended me. That grew into love in the years since. While I didn't really act on my feelings until this past year, it took a lot of heavy-handed hinting from me, and Kurama-san from what you've told me, to make it finally stick. Even then, it took you almost being killed before you apparently reflected on our relationship more than you normally would have in order to finally see how much in love I am in with you. Hinata explained softly, secretly enjoying tormenting Naruto with reminders of his density as she watched him flinch visibly several times. She did wait for him a long time and wanted a small measure of revenge. Ouch. I get it, I need a little help. He admitted as he did his sheepish pose. She had to giggle at his concept of little before she leaned in to give him a long and deep kiss on the lips that he happily returned, and it stretched into minutes in the darkness of the backyard. Soon outside the compound, after spending some time making small talk, they decided Hinata needed to go to bed. With a long and reluctant exchange of good nights, Naruto was on his way back into the village with his eye patch firmly back in place. There was a lonely 5-kilometer stretch of pathway leading into the main part of the village from the clan's district that all shinobi were able to cover in just minutes with their enhanced speed, but Naruto decided to take his time walking. As he was enjoying his stroll, he sensed something was a bit off with his tenant. Kurama, is something bothering you? I can feel it from out here. I'm fine. Just thinking about what's going on between you and that flower girl. What's wrong with Ino-chan? She went after that waste of sperm just because of his popularity. What makes you think she isn't doing the same with you? I understand where you're coming from. However, we were just kids. In addition, she had a perfectly happy and normal childhood because her parents insisted on that and only lightly trained her until recently. It's almost expected of her to fall in with the popular crowd, like many other children her age, at least for a while. I'm just happy she realized early on that there was more to life than to blindly follow the latest trend. Also, even though I know I'm totally awesome and handsome, he smirked upon hearing Kurama scoff dismissively. It doesn't change the fact I'm not popular. Aside from the ones I care about, the other girls didn't even look in my direction more than once. For Ino-chan to want to date me, it makes me think she's sincere about this. I suppose the fact that you helped her realize she needed to set her priorities straight about being a kunoichi had something to do with this too. You really kicked the Sasuke-kun fantasies out of her. Naruto grimaced. Don't remind me. It's not something I want to remember. Anyway, you know I've always liked her a little since I met her. It was when she started talking about the tem that I decided I'd think of her as a sister figure. Apparently that didn't last long, and the feeling came back stronger when I realized she was looking at me as possibly more than just a friend lately. He felt Kurama smile gently. Of course not. How can you not have any feeling for her? The one who was the first to befriend you, without any hesitation, and truly saved you from your darkness. I actually feared you would have gone back for the fifth and final time soon after that night, but she latched onto you in time and wouldn't let go until you were all better. Yeah, I owe her my life, that's for sure. That's why I did what I had to do, because in a way, I was returning the favor by making her see the world for what it is. Were you expecting her to give up on pink eyes soon afterward? Cammy, even I feel bad for the tem with you calling him such nasty names like that. Anyway, to be honest, I expected her to keep on going after him, but at least do it like a kunoichi. Train, get strong, and earn his attention that way. I just wanted nothing more than to make sure she had the best possible chance of making it far in this world. It wasn't my intention for her to eventually shift her attention to me, but I'm happy she's taking her training seriously at least. I'm apparently attracted to strong women and there's nothing hotter than a kunoichi that knows what she's doing. You're just like your father in that regard. However, be cautious with her, Naruto. I'm giving her a chance because of your past with her and that she might have unknowingly saved us with her friendship. Despite what you've said about her childhood naivety, she's on thin ice for a little while longer until I see her resolve and determination to stand by your side in the future. You're going to be strong and you'll have powerful enemies and allies. Because of that, weak-willed and finicky women have no place in your life with their unnecessary distractions. I'm serious when I said I will make it known if I don't approve of any female that doesn't deserve you, and you'd better listen to me on that. Thank you. I'm not worried about anything with her, though. I know you'll warm up to her eventually. Even so, as long she doesn't fuck this up, everything should go smoothly. Naruto nodded. He appreciated his friend's protectiveness, but he was also happy he got her blessing at least. He walked in silence for a while until he just passed the halfway point on the pathway to the village. At that moment, he was truly isolated and as far away from any help as possible. This was why he was instinctively aware and became tense upon hearing his tenant snarl fiercely. 20 meters on your 10 o'clock, above. Crouching high in a thick tree sitting by its lonesome was an almost invisible shinobi, dressed from top to bottom in a black full stealth outfit that easily blended in with the darkness. It came complete with a black shinobi balaclava covering the entirety of his head. The hole for his eyes had a one-way mesh screen sewn on which allowed him to see out while blocking out his eyes to avoid any possibility of being identified. Strapped diagonally to his back was a pitch-black sheath for an unusually long ninjutsu. It was easy to make this enemy out to be a male because of how his large frame was built underneath his tight outfit. This unknown enemy saw Naruto's body tense ever so slightly, and took this as the cue to make his move. Naruto barely dodged the hail of kunai and shuriken that burst out of the tree. They sped past him so fast they were nearly invisible blurs. As he landed into a roll on the ground to avoid one more hail of projectiles, he quickly deactivated the inhibiting seal on his eye patch. The gesture was quick and discreet to avoid drawing the enemy's attention to his left eye. His Sharingan fully active, he quickly got to his feet in a ready stance with a sharp glare. He cursed being in civilian clothes and his own laziness for not getting around to painting some storage seals onto his body to hide some throwing weapons. Fortunately, he at least painted the important one on. For now, he decided to try to observe this enemy. He thought about raising an alarm, but he felt this enemy was fast enough to silence him permanently if he relaxed his guard for even a second. For the moment, he truly was on his own against this unknown person, who had yet to come into view. The alert blonde briefly made out a human-shaped outline of chakra behind thick leaves in the tree that Kurama pointed out. At that instant, the enemy disappeared in a blur for another location. Luckily, he saw the chakra long enough to see that it was blue with some brown mixed in, a good indication of water and earth being this enemy's nature affinities. Thankfully, he had several Doden jutsu he learned from Jiraiya and Kakashi to combat this, and made a mental note to use his Kaden jutsu sparingly in this confrontation. He began rapidly scanning the battlefield, memorizing the entire layout in order to find advantages. If his eye patch wasn't in place, his glowing ice blue iris zipping around quickly with purpose inside the socket would have mesmerized many. After scanning the battlefield, he decided he had very few, if any, advantages. The enemy apparently picked an excellent location for ambush. The pathway he was still crouching on cut through the center of a giant clearing. It had almost no cover save for a few trees, and it was in the middle of the thick forest separating the clan's district from the main part of the village. It was clear the enemy intended to keep him contained here in the clearing away from possible interference. Anbu heavily patrolled the area most of the time, but their presence in this particular part of the forest went down to almost nothing on moonless nights. To add to his troubles, with no moon, the area was shrouded in near pitch black darkness with only the dimly glowing sky above the well-lit village nearby providing very faint lighting. Naruto was able to see everything like it was daytime with his Sharingan, but he didn't want to clue the enemy in on the fact there was something special behind his eye patch if he was still moving around like he saw everything perfectly fine. For the deception, he channeled a little of his tenant's chakra to his right eye for the fox eye. It changed colors to crimson red with a sinister glow that easily stood out in this oppressive darkness. It helped that the fox eye actually complemented the Sharingan with its ability to see in the dark and improved vision. Seeing this, the still hidden enemy shivered slightly from the sinister aura it was emitting, and cursed inwardly. He knew he already lost the ability to use the cover of darkness as an advantage. Son of a bitch. This fucker has to be at least Junin if he managed to conceal himself from my senses until he was practically right on top of us. Even now, I can't get a lock on this guy. He's also ballsy enough to attack us in this darkness. He must have been well trained to be able to negate that disadvantage. Kurama ranted. Naruto took one more look around the area, unable to find the enemy now. He frowned in worry. From your observations, it seems I can't beat this one without your chakra, and even that might be iffy. I promised Hokage Gigi I wouldn't use that here in the village unless it was last resort. I'll have to run away or fight him off long enough for help to come. Arg. I hate this bullshit. I can't wait for the day the container of the Kyuubi will be able to kick anyone's ass with just a look. The beautiful tenant growled in helpless frustration. Naruto had to grin slightly at that. He easily could tell she was worried for his welfare, not his reputation as her container. Even Ero Sennin and Kakashi Sensei run away when the situation doesn't favor them. You all did train me to be a proper shinobi, not a glory-seeking idiot that would run headfirst into any situation with a battle cry. Upon that thought, he immediately sprinted for the edge of the clearing closest to him, clearly going into full retreat deep into the forest beyond. The young man's choice momentarily surprised the enemy. He had expected the target to be more like a brash teen and stand his ground even against an obvious disadvantage. Instead, the young man was acting like an experienced shinobi. Despite his respect for the target going up a little, he had a job to do. With a flick of his wrist, Tsukuyomi shot toward the retreating blonde at the fastest speed possible. Naruto easily saw the Tsukuyomi coming at him from his left. They flew much faster than the two earlier hails of projectiles and would have sunk into the left side of his skull if he continued on his path toward the forest. However, with his Sharingan active, he reacted just in time to jump into a forward flip right above their predicted flight paths. His hands then instinctively shot out as the kunai passed under to snatch them out of the air by their rings. Landing on his feet, he smirked at having a kunai in each hand now. The enemy bit back a curse. He had inadvertently armed the teen. Looking toward where his newly acquired weapons came from, Naruto saw faint trances of chakra hiding behind a thick bush at the forest's treeline not far from him. Putting a kunai between his lips to free up his right hand, he did a powerful underhand toss with his left to send the other weapon screaming right back at the enemy's location before blurring through hand seals. "Kunai Kage Bushin," he whispered through the kunai in his mouth, pumping a decent chunk of chakra into this one. The single kunai flying toward the momentarily shocked enemy instantly multiplied into hundreds. With a roaring crash, the large bush was instantly shredded into tiny pieces, and the surrounding trees were peppered with kunai everywhere for a brief moment before they all popped into smoke. Naruto didn't bother to give this any more attention as he instantly took off for the clearing's perimeter once again. He knew that was nowhere near enough to beat the enemy. He just needed to slow this guy down even just a tiny bit. A hail of shuriken shot out from Naruto's right this time, and he had to acrobatically flip over the deadly metal stars whizzing by under him. He wasn't confident enough to safely catch shuriken flying at that speed. Two more shot for where he was going to land, but he used the kunai he still kept to deflect them away just in time as he continued to run. He dealt with two more attacks like this until he reached the perimeter finally. With a shout of triumph, he leapt into the trees, only to be startled by multiple harsh hissing sounds all around him as he landed on a branch. His eyes widened as he instantly recognized the telltale sound of explosive tags activating. The portion of the forest the blonde jumped into erupted into an enormous fireball that rose into the sky, lighting it up like it was daytime for an instant. A massive shockwave reverberated throughout the area immediately afterward, likely alerting anyone for miles. The oppressive darkness then slowly returned as the fireball billowed skyward into black smoke, with the exception of some light from the flickering flames peppering the demolished portion of the forest. Naruto, now standing near the center of the clearing, watched this with an impassive expression as he worked to lower his heart rate from being nearly blown to bits. Despite his reluctance at first, he was glad he got the Sharingan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have memorized that there was a piece of deadwood sitting here to switch with using Kawarimi. He frowned as he felt a twinge of pain in his left side and looked down at his body. "Shit, that got a piece of me," he muttered as he tore off his ripped and burnt t-shirt to reveal a muscular torso with his left shoulder and arm somewhat burned. Kurama already began healing the damage, so there was no concern. Anyone observing his upper body would have been interested in a small circular seal drawn onto his right hip, just above his shorts waistline. In addition, there was a seal located just above his right bicep that looked similar to what many Anbu used to switch outfits on the fly in case there was a need for a quick response to any situation. In Naruto's case, that was used only to store his outfit if he needed to transform. You just alerted everyone to here with that huge explosion. I would say you have 5 minutes to try whatever it is you need to do with me. He spoke calmly as he turned around to stand face to face with the tall black-clad man, now standing 10 meters away with his long ninjutsu out in front of him. The mysterious enemy just remained silent, his body not giving anything away. "I don't suppose you'd tell me why you're attacking me?" Naruto continued in a curious tone. He had to at least try, but the enemy's continued silence was his answer. He scoffed and shrugged. "Fine, have it your way, asshole. Since I don't know if you booby-trapped the rest of the perimeter, I guess I'm stuck in here with you. With that, my new objective is to stay alive and keep you here long enough for capture when the nice Anbu arrive." "Sounds easy enough," he finished with a challenging smirk. "You do realize you're bluffing, right?" Kurama cut in. "I know. I figure it's a little harder to kill a guy who's fighting to stay alive instead of winning, though. I would try to shunshin out of here if I could, but I don't think that's a good idea. Yeah, can't be sure that won't take you right into more traps. Be careful." The enemy rushed in at this point and swung his ninjutsu down, which Naruto quickly blocked overhead with his borrowed kunai. He had to grimace at the strength behind this man's strike as he pushed the sword off to the side. The man quickly recovered and swung the sword at him from under this time, making Naruto backflip to avoid the slash at where his face was just an instant ago. He sure as hell wasn't risking losing another eye now. The man quickly pressed his advantage, swinging and stabbing his ninjutsu at Naruto's vitals with such precision while the blonde barely deflected all of the strikes. Each screeching clash of metals lit up the clearing with sparks as they continued their ferocious battle. Eventually the pace rose to such speed that it looked like there was a continuous spark between the two combatants as they danced at a high tempo around each other. The blonde was getting more acrobatic with each strike. He had to bend back almost horizontal to the ground at one point. He silently thanked Kakashi for the grueling training sessions with the Sharingan over the summer. He doubted he would have lasted this long, being unable to predict this powerful enemy's actions in time. His stomach dropped like a brick when he heard a sharp metallic crack, and glanced at the kunai in his hand to see a good chunk of the blade had broken off far too quickly due to wear. Just what is this guy's sword made out of? The enemy took this chance to dash in for a stab at one of Naruto's kidneys, but the blonde quickly recovered to slip out of the way with a little gash on his left side to show for it. He then tossed the broken kunai still in his hand at the man's head, forcing him to dodge by rolling away. With Naruto's throwing strength, it was still a deadly projectile. The blonde then took this chance to hop back a few times for some distance between the two of them. Steadying himself and inhaling deeply, he calmed himself as the enemy rushed in again, positioning his sword to continue the assault. Exhaling harshly, his glowing crimson eyes sharpened into focus. Earlier in the Hyuga compound, Hinata grinned as she arched her body into a sensual stretch on her bed before nuzzling her cheek deeper into the pillow with a low moan. Her mind was still stuck on the conversation and the long kiss she shared with Naruto not too long ago. It honestly shouldn't have surprised her that he was a natural at being a loving boyfriend like many other things else he tried so far. Dealing with his density for years, she was expecting the beginning of their romance to be slow, awkward, and a bit rocky. However, she would freely admit to being very pleasantly surprised when he immediately took to his new role as her lover with little issue as soon as he realized their true feelings for each other. She wondered if spending a lot of time with his female friends and reading Jiraiya's books might have had something to do with that. Of course the books were smutty, but the Toad Sage, despite his openly perverted nature, did have a great understanding of how to treat women well. Wanting to satisfy her curiosity, she had borrowed several volumes, while Naruto wasn't looking, when she visited his apartment one day. After reading through them, and dealing with nosebleeds combined with nearly fainting many times, she hoped Takami Naruto was going to do even just half of the naughty stuff in the books to her when they were ready for the next step in their relationship one day. Naruto-kun is many things, but no one would ever find his picture next to the word ordinary in any dictionary. She thought with a quiet giggle before blushing at remembering how wonderful his lips and hot breath felt on her neck just 30 minutes ago. She was still feeling some warm tingling exactly where his lips touched, as if they left a trail of lukewarm fire in their wake that refused to die out. Before her body would begin reacting to the memory and sensation, she was shocked out of it by a bright yellow flash of light that flooded her bedroom through the window for an instant before a thunderous concussive wave crashed through the room, rattling it slightly. A wide-awake Hinata leapt out of bed and grabbed her yukata draped over a nearby chair to put on over her dark blue tank top and white pajama pants. She then ran to the window and gasped upon seeing a large ball of smoke and flame rise above the forest between the clan's district and the village. Instinctively activating her Byakugan, she pumped chakra into her eyes to zoom in toward where the smoke came from. Her insides immediately felt like one solid block of ice upon seeing the very familiar shape of Naruto glaring down a tall shinobi clad in black. This man had his head surrounded in a thick haze, as if something was blocking her Byakugan from seeing his true identity. What worried her even more was the trees around the clearing were practically covered top to bottom in explosive tags. Her beloved was trapped with that man. Her 360-degree vision showed Hanabi and Hiyashi hastily converging on her bedroom door behind her. Dropping the zoomed-in vision for the moment, she turned around to see her father, in his pajamas, slide the door open forcefully with her younger sister, clad in her own yukata, looking on worriedly behind him. Their Byakugan were active. Come. Based on what we have dealt with in the past, this may be a possible diversion in an attempt to separate me from the two of you. And I will not have you out of my arm's reach. Hiyashi commanded gently as he herded the girls into the living room, far from any window. The girls desperately wanted to go out and help Naruto. Oni-chan needs our father. Naruto-kun is The girls cried at the same time before Hiashi raising a hand silenced them. I do understand how you are feeling, but I cannot risk any possible attack on either of you. 5 of our night guards are now leaving the compound to assist Naruto-san in any way possible. In the meantime, you two will remain here with me for your safety. We will go see him as soon as we are sure there would be no danger to any of us. The heiresses began to form rebellious expressions and apparently wanted to keep insisting. Hiashi clearly read their intention and continued in a crisp tone. He would have wanted you to be safe. In addition, we are unable to assist him unless we carefully bypass the explosive tags. Until then, you would have been a distraction to him from outside the perimeter if he knew of your presence. This made the girls flinch before looking down with despondent expressions. I do not believe you would have to worry too much about him, however. He seems to be fending off his opponent well enough, he said with an assuring grin as his eyes focused toward where Naruto was. Giving in for the moment, the girls decided to at least watch the battle and hope for their favorite blonde to come out of this uninjured. When they focused their visions, their eyes widened. Yamanaka Flower Shop Ino shot up into sitting on her bed, half asleep and half confused. Her light blue eyes darted around the dark bedroom for a presence she thought she felt. She somehow knew right away it was from much farther away, but she had to be sure. Relaxing at finding no sign of anything odd around her, she forced any remaining sleep out of her mind and began pondering this odd feeling. It felt familiar to her for some reason and it spiked for only an instant when it woke her up. All of a sudden, she felt another twinge deep within her. There. That weird feeling again, was all she was able to think before being momentarily blinded by a flash of yellow light flooding into the room from the window next to her bed. A loud shockwave followed, crashing through the room and disorientating the young blonde for a moment. Suddenly, a distressed cry came from her parents' room. She knew that voice. Mom! Ino shouted as she got out of bed, swiped a kunai out of the holster hanging off her desk chair, and crashed through the door into the hallway to scramble for her parents' bedroom at one end. Slamming the door open, she calmed down upon seeing her mother, Yamanaka Kana, sitting up in bed looking completely fine, except for her visibly worried expression. Her father was working overnight in the T&I department at the moment. Kana was a beautiful woman with long and slightly curly light brown hair that fell down in waves to her mid-back. She also had the most striking hazel eyes anyone had ever seen. Other than these differences, she looked like a slightly older copy of Ino, complete with a long bang over her right eye. It was clear that while Ino might have gotten her blonde hair and eye color from her father, most of her physical features and personality came from her mother. In addition, many women were jealous of Kana's youthful beauty despite being in her mid-30s. Naruto had been so convinced she was an older sister of Ino's when he first met her that he had thought he was being jested when a blushing and very flattered Kana corrected him. She used to be in the shinobi force as a chunin, but retired upon becoming pregnant with her daughter. She also took over managing the flower shop and the day-to-day clan business since her husband worked in the T&I department often. However, she kept up her training to a degree since she volunteered to remain on reserve in case anything happened. It was considered a significant loss when she retired because of her excellent sensor ability, which allowed her to easily single out anyone in the entire village or a battlefield if she so wished. That was what had her so distressed as Ino ran up to her bedside. It's Naruto-kun. I think he's in trouble. Kana exclaimed as she grabbed her daughter into a tight hug to try to calm herself. She considered Naruto almost like a son ever since her husband introduced him all those years ago and loved his bright and mischievous personality that seemed to bring out nothing but the best in Ino. It was her greatest desire to see the two blondes end up together someday. What do you mean? Ino became increasingly worried when she remembered her mother was able to easily pick out where Naruto was anywhere in the village due to his massive chakra reserves. There were spikes of his chakra, and I can tell he's using jutsu outside of the training grounds. I'm feeling him next to a powerful chakra signature in the forest by the clan's district. I can sense help coming, but they won't arrive for at least a few minutes. Kana said frantically. Ino realized right away the strange twinges she had when she woke up might have been spikes of Naruto's chakra usage. Had she inherited her mother's sensing ability, and it was beginning to manifest itself now. Concentrating within herself for a moment, she felt a somewhat ghostly but comforting presence that was so intimately familiar to her, as if she had been around it for years and only just realized its existence. It was calling to her from the aforementioned forest, and she knew right away she was feeling Naruto's chakra. That would have filled her entire being with blissful joy for feeling closer to her future love in such a way if this situation didn't demand her attention. I think that's what I felt just now. We have to help him, Mom, she urged as she got out of the hug. Kana, being similar to Ino in many ways, thought about dusting off her old Chunin outfit and head out to help Naruto in any way possible. The fact she'd have a hell of time getting her headstrong daughter to stay here for her safety made her falter on that action for the moment. A gentle prod in her mind broke her out of her thoughts. Inoichi was trying to reach her with telepathy. Your father's calling, she said calmly as she put her hands together in a seal. Ino nodded and pressed her right palm to her mother's forehead to join the conversation. You're all right. I was worried when we heard the explosion from over here. Inoichi's relieved voice came in loud and clear through the women's minds. Daddy, it's Naruto-kun. We can feel his chakra spiking over by the clan's district. Ino thought urgently. Kana added her affirmation. What? Is he okay? Exclamation mark. Wait, you're able to sense him, princess. A little. I think I might have inherited mom's sensing ability. While that'd be great news any other time, Ino-chan, we'll have to discuss it later. We need to go help Naruto-kun. He's fighting someone powerful and I can feel they're building up their chakra for some strong jutsu. We should gear up. Kana cut in with a bit of impatience for wasting time on helping Naruto, deciding she'd take Ino along and at least keep her within arm's reach. The women were about to get ready when they sensed Inoichi turning his attention away for a moment, apparently speaking with someone, before they felt his increasing nervousness. He knew his headstrong wife and daughter weren't going to like hearing this. About that, I just got word that Hokage-sama just ordered all regular shinobi and civilians to remain where they are no matter what we hear or sense. He said to let only the Anbu handle this. What? The ladies growled out loud, making Inoichi shiver in fear. He was going to get it whenever he got home. He wondered if this incident would hopefully result in him working double shift or longer, allowing him to avoid a pair of angry women long enough for them to cool down, despite how slim that possibility was. Only an Uzumaki woman's legendary temper was more potent than both his princesses. The women were about to savagely rip into the man when multiple massive spikes of chakra stopped them cold. Ino sensed those even with her newfound ability still budding. A powerful rumble vibrated throughout the house, making them tense. Not even a full minute later, an even brighter flash of light flooded the bedroom through the windows, followed by a stronger shockwave that rattled everything, toppling a few things over. Kami, is that young man even remotely normal? Kana whispered in awe as her bright hazel eyes looked somehow glazed over, since she was able to feel the battle unfold from here. Ino had to grin proudly at that. There's no one else like him, that's for sure. Purple Sister's apartment. If any man, especially Jiraiya, were standing in the living room at this moment, he would have thought he died and went to heaven. A sleeping Yugao was lazily sprawled out on her back, snoring away cutely on the couch. She was in her nightwear, a baby blue spaghetti strap tank top, which had her braless DD cup breasts about to spill out, with a pair of black yoga shorts so short they barely covered her sexy black lace boyshort panties. Her left limbs were resting on the backrest while her right limbs hung off the couch. In between her legs laid Anko on her stomach as she was snuggling up to her surrogate sister with her arms wrapped tightly around the waist. She was mumbling nonsense about something, big and soft, and drooling slightly as she nuzzled her face in between Yugao's large breasts. She was wearing an orange oversized t-shirt that barely covered her modesty standing up. However, due to her position, it rode up all the way to the visible undersides of her low D-cup breasts, revealing a pair of burnt orange bikini panties that did little to cover her perfectly round and firm rear end on display for all to see. Empty sake bottles littered the coffee table in front of the couch, and it was apparent the women were drinking, if their flushed faces were any indication. Yugao frowned in her sleep and mumbled some nonsense before gently wrapping her arms around Anko's head to pull it deeper into her chest, making for a cute and sexy sight. This perverted fantasy come true didn't last long as the explosive tag's shockwave ripped through their apartment, jolting the women out of their drunken slumber. Her eyes shooting wide open, Yugao was the first to react as she shot up off the couch, bucking Anko off in the process. The younger woman landed on the floor ungracefully with a surprised yelp, before she quickly got to her feet with a small blush. All traces of drinking gone, or at least ignored, they shared a wary expression and nodded. Like other powerful kunoichi, they were ready for anything. Yugao pressed a finger to her Anbu tattoo on her right bicep, and her nightwear instantly switched to her full Anbu outfit with her mask already in place. Anko followed suit, pressing a seal Naruto helped draw on her left bicep one day, and she was instantly dressed and ready in her usual kunoichi outfit. Her hair left down being the only difference from her usual everyday appearance. "I'll check on Naruto," she said briskly as the women quickly zipped out of their apartment and wordlessly split up at the building's stairwell. Yugao slipped outside through a nearby window and ran up the side of the building to the roof in order to get an idea of what was going on from any passing shinobi. Anko gracefully jumped down several flights of stairs before getting off at Naruto's floor. Upon reaching his door, she quickly took out her copy of his apartment key to unlock it and barged in. After a moment's glance around, she was dismayed to find no sign of anyone home. Cursing, she quickly turned around to sprint back down the hallway to an open window at the end, and leapt outside onto a rooftop across the street. Yugao easily joined her from the apartment building's roof above just as she landed, and they went full speed across the roofs with the older woman in lead. Several Anbu and shinobi were seen moving across the rooftops around them. There's something going on in the forest by the clan's district. A Hyuga nearby reported a large clearing's entire perimeter is rigged to blow. Two are apparently battling in the center. The Anbu reported crisply before looking at Anko over her shoulder. The young Junin easily felt Yugao's concern even from behind the cat mask. Naruto-kun's one of them, she whispered. Anko clenched her fists tightly as she fought back a string of loud curses. And they had to wait until I'm fucking hungover to start this shit. Who's the dead asshole fighting him? She muttered hotly, ready to take her foul mood out on the person responsible. Yugao shook her head. Even the Hyuga wasn't able to see. The enemy was wearing some sort of a headgear that somehow blocked out the Byakugan, like our Anbu masks. Well, that won't matter when I slice his head off. The snake mistress snarled. She nearly lost her friend, and not so secret love, once, and she wasn't about to let it happen again. I should at least tell you Hokage-sama has ordered all regular shinobi and civilians to stay put. Only Anbu are to respond. Yugao threw that out half-heartedly, knowing exactly how her surrogate sister would react. Bullshit. That's Naruto out there, and you know I won't stand by on the side. Anko growled with a murderous scowl that dared anyone to tell her otherwise. Yugao had to allow a small smile behind her mask at her friend's predictable stubbornness as the duo continued their trek across the roofs. They almost slid to full stop upon hearing and feeling a loud rumble. Feeling uneasy, their faces became agape upon watching the tallest earth wall they've ever seen rise high above the trees exactly where Yugao said Naruto was trapped. A few seconds later, another rumble echoed through the air as one entire side of the wall suddenly spouted sharp spikes. The beautiful women were speechless and seemed to have continued roof hopping on automatic for a long moment as they tried to form thoughts for what they saw. Anko was the first to break the spell. What the foo? Her elegantly worded response was cut short when the wall was suddenly broken up into large pieces and then demolished in a massive inferno of white-hot fire that lit up the sky once again. This was accompanied by a shockwave even more powerful than the first one, rattling the women and the rest of the village. Was that Naruto-kun? That looks like a high-level ninjutsu battle. Yugao whispered in shock. If it was, that bastard was holding back on his ninjutsu in our spars. Anko quipped. Yugao turned toward her with a deadpan expression behind her mask. You want him to use that on you, she muttered as she jerked her head toward the massive mushroom cloud of flame and smoke rising into the sky. Anko's sheepish silence was her answer as they continued onward. Back with Naruto a few minutes earlier, everyone's favorite blonde grunted in pain and annoyance as he received another superficial gash on his left shoulder courtesy of the sword belonging to the black-clad man attacking him. He spent the last half-minute avoiding the man's rapid sword strikes as much as he was able to now that he didn't have weapons for the moment. Unfortunately, he didn't get away unscratched, and his body had several healing cuts and gashes to prove that. As he hopped back at his fastest speed, making sure to always keep facing the enemy that was sticking to him like white on rice, Naruto was waiting for his chance to strike back. He just needed to find a few seconds to bring out his trump card, a few seconds the enemy wasn't giving him at all. As he briefly glanced around at his surrounding while avoiding another slash from his opponent, he smirked as an idea popped into his head. As he continued to keep what little distance he had from the enemy, he slowly maneuvered them around the clearing to a certain location. Just as they passed over it with the black-clad man about to slash at his target's neck, he was shocked to find the blonde suddenly gone from his view with his sword slicing through empty air. The shock was replaced by agony in the next instant as he felt a foot bury itself into his right side where his kidney was, and he was knocked to the side several meters before rolling to a stop. Panting in pain, he struggled to get up. He just knew he was going to piss blood for the next week. Glancing over at his target, he realized what just happened. Naruto had maneuvered them to this particular part of the clearing where a very thick root snaked out of the ground in an arch before disappearing back underground. It formed a perfect handhold in which he easily reached down and grabbed hold to suddenly stop his body's momentum while the enemy passed over him. He then used it to spin around on his hands to nail his surprised opponent in the side with a powerful kick and knock him away far enough. This wouldn't have been possible if his Sharingan didn't pick up on this tiny detail from his earlier scanning. Naruto smirked victoriously now that he had some time to bring out what he needed while the enemy was still struggling to his feet. He began to reach for the seal on his hip. "I won't let you," the man gritted out through his pain. His first spoken words of the evening surprised Naruto out of his intended action and forced him to look at the enemy, who began blurring through hand seals, which his Sharingan picked up easily. Another jutsu copied, he might have felt a little bothered if the enemy wasn't trying to use it on him. In response, his hands blurred through a different set of hand seals almost as if he instinctively knew the counter. "Doten. Doryuso Earth Flow Spears," the man shouted as he slapped a hand on the ground. Immediately, many large spikes of earth grew out of the ground in front of the man and homed in on Naruto, who just finished his hand seals. "Doten. Doryuheiki Earth-style wall," he growled and slammed both hands to the ground. Just as the spikes were about to skewer him, a massive earth wall shooting out of the ground with a loud rumble rudely interrupted them. Naruto yelled out a long feral cry as he continued to pump more chakra into this wall. The wall didn't stop growing until it reached high into the sky and became so wide it cut across the clearing, blocking him from the stunned black-clad man on the other side. Naruto straightened up with a slight pant as he took in the massive wall he created. "Can't believe all of this only took a small chunk out of my reserves. I feel like I still have enough to do 10 of these." He mumbled disbelievingly to himself as he tried to relax, now that he made some breathing room. "Endless chakra control exercises and practice will do that," Kurama retorted with clear pride in her voice for her host before frowning. "Oi, I think I'm feeling him getting close to the wall. Can't be sure but be ready. He'll obviously try to get to your side." Naruto's malicious smirk made her entire body shiver in delight. "I have an answer for that," he thought as he went through another set of hand seals. "Time to send this enemy's jutsu back at him. Doten. Doryuso," he muttered as he stepped up to the wall and forcefully slammed both hands against it. With a loud rumble, he easily felt the entire opposite side of his wall suddenly sprout sharp spikes. He smirked when he heard a yelp of surprise. On the other side, the enemy was shocked. 1 second, he was getting ready to climb up over the wall and continue the fight with his target. Instead, earth spikes shot out of the entire wall, nearly skewering him as he forced himself to stop in his track a mere inch or so from the sharp tips. He growled in annoyance and prepared another jutsu. "Two can play that game." He moved the bottom of his balaclava up to expose his mouth and jumped high in the air. "Naruto, he's preparing a jutsu," Kurama warned as her host tensed for anything. Sweet on a water-severing wave was barely heard from the other side before an incredibly powerful thin jet of water quickly and easily cut through the wall near the base from one side to the other at a downward angle. Naruto was almost sliced in half when he instinctively hopped and twirled his body in midair horizontally when the water jet passed through where his waist was an instant ago. Upon landing he hopped back quickly to make room, shuddering a little due to that close call. He didn't have time to relax as he heard a loud crack and a low rumble. He snapped his gaze up in surprise at his newly sliced earth wall beginning to tilt in his direction, about to collapse onto his half of the clearing. "Fuck," Naruto growled as he hurriedly gathered a large amount of chakra within himself while watching the wall continue to tilt agonizingly slow over him. Soon it would reach its point of no return and turn into a huge hassle for him to avoid the falling pieces. Finally, he waited long enough and blurred through a long set of hand seals. Kaden. Zukoku, intelligent hard work, he bellowed, opening his mouth wide. In the next instant, a tightly compressed bright red sphere formed and spun rapidly in front of the open mouth. He spent a long second pumping a lot of chakra into the ball as it struggled to stay compressed with so much power within it. Just when the wall was about to pass the point of no return, Naruto released the ball. The force of the release was so great it sent him sliding back a few meters, his heels digging deeply into the ground as he barely managed to remain standing with chakra in his feet. The compressed sphere immediately expanded into an enormous ball of white-hot flame zeroing in on the center of the tilting earth wall. The result was obvious as the entire wall broke into large pieces when the huge flaming ball violently slammed into it, before exploding into a massive firestorm covering almost all the pieces of the wall in flames. Most importantly, most of the flaming pieces were easily blown back toward the enemy's half of the clearing. Predictably, the enemy cursed loudly as the pieces of burning earth rained down on him. Phew. Naruto panted, now beginning to truly feel the drain on his reserves as he watched the smoldering pieces of his earth wall cover the entire clearing. I love the fact you know almost every Kaden jutsu out there, Kurama, he thought with a feral smirk. Of course. It won't do for the strongest entity ever to not know everything possible about her personal affinity. Kurama retorted with mock haughtiness before something caught her attention. Oi, the All Naruto's Bitches United club just stopped outside the perimeter. Looks like they aren't moving in yet, so I guess we were right about this area being trapped. Naruto chuckled lightly at his tenant's version of the acronym, ANBU, and relaxed. He kept the enemy here long enough for the best possible chance at capturing him. Now he just needed to get out of here without at least getting hurt. Time for me to even the field. He finally mumbled to himself after a long moment of resting to allow his body to catch up with the massive drain on his reserves. Hearing some shifting soil a short distance away, he reached for the seal on the right side of his hip. The black-clad man groaned as he pushed himself out of the ground among the burning wreckage of the earth wall. He barely got away from the destruction with his hiding like a mole jutsu. He growled in frustration as he got to his feet since he felt like he was close to running out of time. That blonde wasn't supposed to be this difficult. Hearing a small pop, he shifted his gaze across the field at Naruto and the sight sank his heart. Now he knew for sure he wasn't going to beat his target without resorting to a long drawn-out battle, something he definitely didn't have the time for. Across the clearing was a shirtless Naruto standing cross-armed with a smirk. His newfound confidence in the previously one-sided situation was due to his two sabers secured at his sides. A thick dark maroon leather belt held his sabers in place and made a perfect contrast with the sabers' pitch-black sheaths. Reflections of light from the surrounding fire danced off the sabers' silver-tinted hand guards, making for an intimidating sight. Naruto decided to leave the other four sabers in storage for now, and hoped this sight would have at least discouraged the enemy, otherwise he was still in for a long battle. Even so, he felt much better about his chances of lasting long enough for help to arrive now. Well, now that I finally got the time to bring these out, shall we begin anew? He bluffed as he casually rested his hands on the saber's hilts. The enemy growled as he brandished his ninjutsu. He honestly didn't want to retreat since he was starting to really enjoy this battle and wanted this to go on longer. Naruto frowned in slight nervousness, wondering what else he had left for intimidation. It's a little risky but try using that. The one that almost made the sword otaku piss her pants. Your friends should be here any second so the aftereffects aren't much of a concern. Kurama suggested. Naruto smirked as he remembered that day. If the enemy didn't run away after this, he was very brave, stupid, or had great poker skills to be able to read his bluff. His hands moving to grip his sword's hilts in reverse hold, he then channeled some wind chakra into them. Having already trained in wind nature manipulation, he already was able to cover the blades with it, but he hadn't yet figured out how to mold the chakra properly in order to extend their range. However, he accidentally came across another use for it. A loud and unearthly shriek filled the air, making the enemy flinch violently. The sound itself felt like it was grating against his skin and sanity little by little, and he began to shiver while staring in astonishment at the young man's sabers. The blades were vibrating violently in their metal sheaths, generating a horrific metallic screech that would haunt nightmares for a long time to come. As Naruto channeled chakra into his ears to block out that horrible noise, he had to admire the incredible work Masamune did, not just with the sabers, but the sheaths too. They were simple but they were created to handle anything thrown at them. That was why Naruto wasn't worried about them shattering under the intense force of the sabers vibrating at an incredibly high rate inside. He then slowly pulled them out, their shriek increasing in intensity with each inch coming out. The enemy's shivering worsened as he continued to stare wide-eyed, until, finally, the blades were completely out of their sheaths, still held in reverse grip. This gave him a brief reprieve from the horrid noise, but even the air itself vibrated due to the blade's exposure to the atmosphere. It was that powerful. Flicking his hands, Naruto twirled the sabers around until he held them in forward grip and formed a X above his head. The moment the vibrating blades touched, the demonic shrieking returned, only much worse this time, and it got to be too much for the enemy. Retreat was now the only thing on his mind, and he didn't want to find out what those blades would do to human flesh. The unholy sound wasn't only beating down the enemy's resolve, but also making the Anbu and a certain purple-haired Junin surrounding the clearing very wary. Just outside the clearing, "What the fuck is that sound?" the certain purple-haired Junin shouted over the awful shriek filling the air. Not even the highly trained Anbu were impervious to the terrifying sound as most of them around Anko flinched into defensive stances to nervously watch for any possible attack. However, the cat-masked Yugao, standing next to Anko, gasped in realization as she remembered this sound. What is he? Oi, hurry the hell up, she barked at the four Anbu working frantically to disable the many explosive tags blocking their way into the clearing. What's wrong? Anko asked the female Anbu worriedly. He's the one doing this, but it's definitely not ready for battle use yet. At this point, it's used for pure intimidation but it'll leave him defenseless afterward. He's apparently gambling on scaring the enemy into not attacking long enough for us to get through. Yugao explained as Anko scoffed. Sounds exactly like him. Let's make sure his faith in us getting his back isn't misplaced. She replied with a cocky grin, before it turned into a grimace as the horrible shriek increased in intensity. She was still having her hangover, after all. What the fuck is that sound? Ow! A new voice echoed Anko's earlier exclamation followed by a smack to the back of someone's head. Watch your language, another voice admonished sternly. Everyone turned to see the Yamanaka matriarch and her daughter approaching. Ino was rubbing the back of her head with a wince under her mother's disapproving glare. The beautiful brunette Kana was dressed in the normal Konoha Chunin outfit while Ino was wearing a simple outfit of a t-shirt and flannel pants, and her hair was down. The Anbu went back to focusing on the traps, deciding Yugao would handle this. What's going on here? Is Naruto-kun okay? Ino exclaimed in worry as she ran up to Anko and Yugao. He's holding off someone and seems to be doing a good job of it. We're about to get through the traps any second now. However, you two should have gotten the order to remain where you were. Yugao spoke with narrowed eyes behind her mask. We have known Naruto-kun since he and my daughter were 5. Do you really expect us to do nothing when we felt he was in danger? Kana replied calmly as she put her hands on Ino's shoulders from behind. Ino nodded forcefully with a determined frown for added affirmation. It didn't help Yugao's case when Anko, helpfully, cleared her throat, reminding her that her surrogate sister wasn't exactly supposed to be here either. She sighed in defeat and decided to just roll with it. To be honest, she wouldn't have been surprised if Hinata's family appeared any minute now. What the fuck is that sound? Exclamation mark. Ouch. And there they are. Yugao thought in deadpan as she and the others turned to see the youngest Hyuga heiress, Hanabi, sheepishly rubbing her head where it was smacked. Her father and clan head Hiyashi was standing nearby with a disapproving glare down at her. Hinata was already moving toward Ino and Anko. At that point, the horrible shrieking sound disappeared instantly, leaving everyone in dead silence for a brief moment. Hinata-chan, can you tell us what's going on? Ino urged. Hinata, whose Byakugan were activated, nodded. However, it didn't take long until she sighed in relief and smiled, making everyone else release the tension in their bodies. He seems perfectly fine now. The other person just faded out of existence all of a sudden, though. There's not even any trace of his chakra left now. She explained with a thoughtful frown. Yugao turned to her. Are you sure? People shouldn't be able to just vanish from your eyes like that. She is correct, Anbu-san. My eyes have seen the same thing, and there is no trace of him. Hiyashi confirmed from behind his daughter. The cat-masked Anbu cursed under her breath at the missed chance for capture. Remembering something else, she perked her head up and turned toward Kana, whom she realized was a censor-type kunoichi in the past. The Yamanaka woman noticed this but shook her head with a shrug. She wasn't able to feel the enemy's chakra anywhere in the village now. It just vanished, which meant this person was skilled at masking his chakra. Yugao cursed inwardly again. Or through, one of the Anbu working on the traps shouted. Almost immediately, all the Anbu and Anko sped through the opening into the clearing ahead with the rest following behind cautiously. The first thing they saw was the utter destruction Naruto's battle had caused to the entire clearing. Not an inch of the area seemed to have been left untouched as pieces of burning earth peppered the land everywhere and the rest were covered by large gashes, craters, and some throwing weapons. Eventually, they found the wayward blonde standing in the center of it all panting while he seemed to struggle to put his sabers back in their sheaths. Ino, Hinata, and Anko blushed slightly at the sight of Naruto's naked torso heaving from his panting as it glistened with sweat under the light from the fire around him. Anko was the first to reach him as Yugao split off to coordinate with more Anbu that just entered the clearing from different locations as they worked to put out the fire and investigate. Gaki. How do you always get into those situations? She exclaimed almost accusingly as she wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug, as if to make sure he was still there. She hadn't completely let go of how he nearly died only a few months earlier. Naruto could only smile sheepishly as his sabers finally clicked home into their sheaths and he let his arms flop lifelessly to his sides. Anko noticed he didn't return the hug and felt a little hurt. That was until she released him and saw something was wrong. Naruto, she whispered. Sorry, I can't move my arms at all now. He replied helplessly as Ino, Kana, Hanabi, and Hinata quickly moved in to hug him as well and then started fussing over him. Why did this happen? Kana. You're cut up, Oni-chan. Hanabi. Baka. You had us worried. Ino. Anyo. I know you had no choice this time, but do be careful, obviously Hinata. You were stupid to do the trick with your sabers. I'm sure you clearly remember the saber's intense vibrations left your arms numb and immobile for half an hour or so afterward the last time you did this. Yugao's voice cut through the chattering, obviously irritated that he took a gamble like that. All attention shifted to the cat-masked Anbu standing in front of Naruto with her arms crossed. All females fell silent and slowly shifted their gazes around to stare at the blonde with obvious disapproval, making him shift nervously. Hiyashi stood off to the side, shaking his head in pity as he made the smart choice to remain silent so as not to draw any of the women's ire. My partner felt your presences out there and we thought I could at least make him hesitate long enough until you guys got through. He was just too strong, and I knew he was holding back against me for most of the battle. Though I think I surprised him with my ninjutsu. I just didn't want to take the chance that if I pressed any longer, he would have gotten even more serious. He was a strong Junin or Anbu, that much I can tell. Yugao sighed and shook her head. The others copied her actions, making him sweat drop. He hoped they would stop being a bunch of mother hens soon, though he understood he did scare them all with his near-death experience recently. In any case, you've done a good job fighting him off. I just wish we were able to capture him. Another minute and we would have had him. The Anbu muttered grouchily. I doubt another minute would have mattered. This was all planned. Naruto rebuked softly. Everyone's attention was instantly on him now. What do you mean? Ino asked with narrowed eyes. He trapped the entire clearing to make sure I couldn't get away. He knew I would be passing through this location, and the fact he was very determined to keep me from unsealing my swords meant he knew he had limited time and didn't want me to make things difficult. That also meant he had been given some information about me, though not all of it if his surprise at seeing me raise that earth wall was any indication. In the end, this was all planned and I wouldn't be surprised he prepared an escape route that even the Anbu couldn't track just when they arrived here. He counted off his observations. So he was targeting you from the beginning. Anko spat out bitterly. The others didn't like that thought either. I wouldn't worry about him coming back for more though. He was clearly testing me, for whatever reason, and seemed to have gotten enough information to be satisfied. He replied, remembering his opponent's acknowledging two-fingered salute as he slowly sheathed his blade before vanishing into thin air like a dissipating mist. At the women's incredulous looks, he continued. Now that I had time to go over the battle in my memory, it looked like a lethal battle, but I can count on one hand the number of times he struck at a sure-kill vital spot on my body out of the hundreds he tried. Those, I easily blocked or dodged as if he telegraphed them. The truth is, other than stabbing my heart, cutting my head off, bleeding me dry, or dropping a whole damn mountain on me, the women shifted uncomfortably at being reminded of how he suffered the full brunt of a massive avalanche. I'm pretty hard to kill since my partner will just help me recover quickly from wounds that would have been fatal on others. Therefore, it was obvious he knew about my status as a Jinchuriki and was making sure to aim for strikes that wouldn't have killed me. Dead silence filled the air as everyone thought on this. Finally, Kana was the one who voiced the obvious question. So who the hell would want to test you? I have no idea, but something tells me I'll find out sooner rather than later. Meanwhile in the Hokage's office the third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, let out an impressed whistle as he cancelled his chakra flow into a crystal ball sitting on the desk in front of him. Just a moment ago, it was showing him what Naruto and the others have just discussed. It was dark in the office except for the dim light from a lone desk lamp. I suppose that was too obvious. I didn't really want to kill him after all. The same masked black-clad man that was just at the clearing a few minutes ago spoke up, now standing across the desk from the third. He looked a little worse for wear but was fine. Still, I can't believe he bluffed me so easily, those vibrating swords were rather terrifying. I probably should have asked for more details about him even though I like some mystery in a battle. He added dejectedly. The third nodded with an amused smirk as he fished a scroll out of his desk. Thank you for testing him. Here's the payment, he said while tossing the scroll to the man, who caught it lazily and pocketed it. The Hokage steepled his hands on the desk and fixed the man with a serious gaze. I know what I just saw, but you faced him directly and would have understood exactly what he's capable of. Do you feel he's strong enough? He didn't even bring out his tenants, power at all during the entire battle. That was completely his strength. Even though I would have liked more time to be able to cross swords with his sabers, he's ready, Hokage-sama. The man replied firmly without any hesitation. Sarutobi nodded, not seeing any point in second-guessing this. He knew he was going to get some grief eventually for testing his surrogate grandson so harshly like this, but he wanted to be completely sure. Then I feel quite assured about my plan to form a two-man squad with him and his Junin commander. You may leave. Thank you, Hokage-sama. If you need me in the next 30 minutes, I'll be visiting a medic fixing my busted kidney, and I'm about to cough up a lung too. Good night. The black-clad man replied with a hint of pain in his voice, and bowed his head before fading into the darkness surrounding the Hokage's dimly lit desk. The Hokage leaned back into the chair with a tired sigh but smiled. He was happy with the results tonight, especially how quickly his Anbu responded to the situation, despite the fact he had Dragon subtly direct the regular Anbu patrols out of that area for that particular time period. Uzumaki Naruto, he clearly met this old man's lofty expectations. The blonde reacted appropriately to everything thrown at him even with the odds against him, and actually managed to overpower his opponent at one point. Then again, Naruto's ninjutsu skill was more than comparable to a Junin's and was easily his best point as a shinobi, despite his other skills being at a high level too. He then was briefly saddened by the thought that his surrogate grandson would have to be exposed to the darker elements of the shinobi world much earlier compared to his peers because of his plan, but he also knew the young man was ready for it. He was certain this would work out best for everyone involved. A clock nearby chimed at midnight, signaling the end to what felt like a very long day. Hiruzen stood and stretched to pop his old bones for a moment, clicked the lamp off, then made his way out of the now dark office toward his quarters. He would let Dragon handle the situation tonight and get some well-earned sleep. Omake. Sibling envy a long time ago in a newly created Konohagakure. What the hell's wrong with you? A tall man wearing a red samurai-style armor, with long straight black hair that went down his back, growled at a white-haired man, dressed in a blue samurai-style armor, who was standing cross-armed in his office. The first man was the legendary first Hokage, Senju Hashirama, the most powerful shinobi in the newly created nations. And he was having a massive migraine as he glared at his spiky-haired brother. Who was Senju Toburama, the second most powerful shinobi behind Hashirama? He was looking bored as he stared at his older brother for a moment. The fuck did I do this time? He grunted with a scowl. Oh, how about the fact you've already screwed half the female population in this village? Including some of the clan heads' wives, you goddamn gigolo. The Hyugas and Uchihas are screaming for your head already. This village isn't even a year old and you're single-handedly destabilizing everything with your fucking gold-plated dick. The first yelled as he slammed a fist on the desk, cracking it slightly. Toburama scoffed amusedly. Nice to know I can do that. However, it's not my fault they can't get it up. The lovely ladies badly needed some stress relief and they weren't getting it from their husbands. Is that all? He spoke dismissively as he made to leave. A massive dose of killing intent filled the office instantly, nearly breaking it apart, and it almost forced him down to a knee with sweat breaking out. He slowly turned back toward an eerily calm-looking first Hokage. Shit, I pushed it too far. I'm not done with you, Senju Toburama. Damn, he used my full name. It's apparent you're not going to listen to me about keeping it in your pants, so I'm going to have to do something drastic. What do you intend to do, brother? Toburama muttered with some dread growing. This newfound peace is too important with distractions like you still around. Therefore, I'm sending you out of Konoha for an indefinite period of time until I deem everything to be stable, and perhaps you'll learn some restraint. Hashirama spoke calmly, and Toburama sighed inwardly at this. He knew he deserved this, but he was a little hurt that his older brother wanted him out of the way. Therefore, this is a top SS rank secret mission because, the first began, and a sweat drop grew on his head. I'm whoring you out. He muttered with a deadpan expression. What? Toburama didn't quite catch that. In other words, your next mission is to be Lady Rinko's boy toy for as long as she wants. Apparently she heard about your talents, and requested you for this. I thought about declining at first, for our village's reputation, integrity, and all that crap, but you forced my hand. Hashirama mumbled grouchily while his younger brother stared at him disbelievingly. Why you mean the Lady Rinko, one of the most beautiful bachelorettes in the nations? Of course, who else would I mean? The first retorted with a smirk before continuing. You obviously can decline, I'll take it. I'll take this, goddamn it. Toburama yelled excitedly as he leaned on the desk across from the first, who tossed a mission scroll in his face. Glad you're so enthusiastic about this. Take this and get the fuck out of here. Don't come back for at least a year. Remember, you have to stay with her for as long as she desires, understand? Yes, brother. I won't let you down. Toburama said excitedly before he disappeared in a white flash to get ready for this mission. There was silence in the office for a long moment before Hashirama's stoic expression cracked with a devilish grin growing. Well, if one's sense of beauty was somewhat off, I suppose this Lady Rinko would be beautiful to some. He chuckled to himself as he took a photo out of the desk. It showed an unattractive middle-aged heavy-set widow with some gray in her oily black hair tied up in a high bun. Hashirama's chuckling grew into full-blown maniacal laughter for a few minutes before calming down. Holy shit, he's definitely going to try to kill me when he gets back. He muttered, unable to keep the grin off his face for a long moment before letting out a depressed sigh and slammed his forehead on the desk. Just what am I doing? Did I actually exact some petty revenge on him for managing to bag Lady Uchiha? But, goddamn it, she's so hot and he just had to be the lucky son of a bitch, not me. Mito-chan would as soon sick the Kyuubi on me before even letting me think of such impure thing. He quipped. Meanwhile at the Senju compound, era, my sixth sense is telling me my handsome husband has been thinking impure thoughts about others again. Uzumaki Mito softly spoke with a hand covering her serene smile. She was a beautiful red-haired woman with violet eyes, and she was wearing a regal-looking kimono with her hair done up in elegant twin buns that each had a piece of sealing paper hanging off. She was kneeling in front of a large piece of paper that she was practicing a new seal on. She had just thought it up. I need to make sure all of his impure thoughts remain focused on me, and I believe I have my first test subject for my new, balls crusher, seal. Such a barbaric but efficient seal has no need for an elegant name. She continued with an evil glint in her striking violet eyes. She then put on a thoughtful expression for a moment. I will have to make this small enough to draw on his magnificent ballsack, and I wonder how I shall apply this without Hashi-kun noticing. Perhaps while I am making him cross-eyed with a world-class blowjob. Or shall I do this? She began muttering out some of the dirtiest sex acts she could think of as she absent-mindedly continued to finish drawing the most horrifying seal ever created. The newly sealed Kurama couldn't help but feel sympathy for Hashirama, even as she hated him with all her passion for defeating her and sealing her in this crazy human. Senju Hashirama suddenly shivered as if he felt an ice-cold hand of death pass through him, and he had no idea why. In the present, "Oi, you done cleaning your half?" A male Konoha Chunin called out to his friend, another Chunin. They were about done cleaning the sealing scrolls storage room in the Hokage tower. "Yeah. Can't believe we have to do this boring shit," the other man muttered as the two Chunin left the room. Before the last man stepped out, his hip bumped into a large scroll and it tipped over onto the floor unnoticed just as the men closed the door. Rolling to a stop a few feet away, the kanji was clearly displayed, and it read, "Scroll of Seals." As it sat innocently in the middle of the room, no one knew that a technique so horrifying no man dared speak of its name was buried deep within it as the very first technique added. It was the first and still the only technique in the scroll that was categorized as an SSS rank kinjutsu with a warning to never use it again, no matter what. Any man who dared to look deep within the scroll for this technique would shudder at the simple name scribbled underneath it, Balls Crusher. To be honest, I'm not 100% happy with this chapter, but I don't honestly know how to improve it in any way. You got your fluff, humor, some action, mystery, and evil Uzumakis. It's probably because I felt like I was focusing too much on Naruto, accepting that it's fine to like more girls, but oh well. At least I likely won't ever go in depth on the topic again. I'm rather proud of the omake and I hope some of you at least nearly died laughing. Smiley face. About Ino, yeah, I decided to give her some sensory ability. I thought it's a good match for someone like her, who would primarily have a support role on the field and she'd be able to help Naruto much more now. Hope you like my another recurring OC, Kana. Smiley face. Naruto's fight, I wanted to briefly show you the level he's currently at. He might be able to take on some Chunin and win, but he still can't do much against most Junin. And he fought a regular Junin. Not an elite like Kakashi, so he still has a long way to go to reach Kakashi or Jiraiya's level. So none of you has to worry about him being so boringly strong. He still has Kurama's power as his trump card, but he won't rely on that too much. The next few chapters will have more of Ino's history with Naruto revealed, a massive prank day for Naruto's graduation, and we'll finally get started on the canon timeline. I honestly didn't think it would take this long to get to that point, however, I feel this will pick up speed from here on out, so no worries about any more extremely slow progression. We're done with that, hopefully. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys liked it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like for more what ifs and support the author. See you guys in the next video.